Yeah, maybe I can start by saying my name is Isabel Ordóñez. I'm working here at the Lizaba as a teacher and researcher, part of the Plastic Justice Project. And we're hosting the seminar today. From this corner, unfortunately, we couldn't meet in person, but we'll do the best out of it. And this has given us the opportunity to be able to be very, very plurinational and get people involved from all around the place. So I'm very much looking forward to that. Some basic housekeeping information. The seminar is being recorded, and we will have it uploaded and available tomorrow morning at the Lizaba's YouTube page, but as a full 4-hour block. A bit undigestible, but we'll cut it down to 1-hour blocks as we have our program today by the end of next week. But the full 4 hours will be available today or tomorrow morning. And then it will also be made available through the project webpage. But then Niels and Lauren can talk a little bit more about that. The other thing is, if you want to comment and ask questions, please do it through the chat. We will, with the moderators, will be picking up questions from here and including them in the questions and answers section of each of the different blocks. We will keep to the timetable as proposed. Actually, we haven't had big changes. So we will be starting every hour sharp. And then when we finish, we'll get a little break before the next hour starts. So we can have a little stretcher, go get some water, etc. So welcome, everybody. I'll leave the floor to Niels and Lauren.
Yeah, thank you, Isabel. Thanks for the quick introduction, and welcome, of course, to all the participants all over Europe and probably, I don't know, all over the world. We're absolutely delighted and happy to sort of, meet here. Unfortunately, of course, under these circumstances, but yeah, the next session, the next half an hour is going to be a bit of a sort of elaborate talk to introduce everyone to the topic of plastic justice, which is in fact the title of a project collaboration that we've been setting up with 5 different academies around Europe. And in particular, that's the KBK, that's the Central St. Martin's, that's Elisava, that's the Iceland School of Arts, and we also have Vilnius University of Arts in the group. And of course, what we're talking is, of course, on behalf of them too. We've been happy to sort of get funding from the European Union for this whole project, this research endeavor. And I'll be introducing with me, because the panel is together with my colleague, Lauren Alexander. Lauren, can you say hello?
Hello, everybody. Welcome. I'm really excited to be here with you all. And this morning, we've actually met for the first time all of our student participants from all of the 5 different schools. So we're really excited this afternoon to be joined by all of you from around the world interested in this topic. So as Neil said, it's a 5-school collaborative project, which has been in the making for about 2 years. So we're really happy finally to get kicked off with our first learning activity today.
Thank you, Lauren. And of course, we also have our lovely colleague, the lecturer of the KBK design lectorate, Alice Tuemelo. Alice, you want to say briefly hello?
Sure. I was looking around to see where the lovely colleague was, but then I found it was me.
I love your background, by the way.
Oh, well, yes. I'm worried that it's sort of glamorizing microplastics a bit. Look, this amazing photo. But anyway, we'll get to that later.
Well, Alice,
should we just jump in?
Exactly. Alice, Lauren, and me will have an open mic policy, so we're gonna have a bit of a discussion. Maybe, Alice, do you want to take it from here?
Sure. Yeah. So, hi, everybody. Great to be part of this project, and even at this sort of peripheral level. I'm Alice Tuemelo, and I'm the lector, which is like a sort of research professor at the Royal Academy of Art in The Hague. I have a nice hybrid role where I work in the Art Academy, working very hands-on with art and design research, but also at the University of Leiden, working in a more kind of humanities context of research. And as I've told students before, I like to mix up those approaches to research into a kind of, like a sort of hybrid approach. So I'm happy to have a short conversation now with Niels and Lauren, who I've had the pleasure of working with before on projects, to really sort of maybe do a little bit of framing for why it is indeed that graphic design would come together with a topic like this, and what we think it might be able to do once it's there. So I'm going to jump right in and ask you guys, because I still need to know all this. What drew you to microplastics as an issue in the first place? Obviously, there are many to choose from right now. Why that one? And which aspects of it concern you the most? So Niels, why don't you start?
Yeah, I think, I don't know, it was sort of an initiative that grew out of the idea, or like actually the sort of dichotomy between the microplastic as a sort of microscopic element, of course, and the planetary impact it has, in fact. And it's, of course, a rather sort of new research topic. We've also seen, already that we are breathing, we are actually, inhaling, we are drinking microplastics. So as a matter of fact, the impact on health is already there. And this sort of, seemingly, let's say, invisible agent has already taken the toll on us. And I think, we are happy to sort of see what art and design can do here, because of course the idea or the fact that it's such an, little sort of, lethal agent actually, which has an effect on the health, should also, be visualized. We have to sort of find language, a visual language, to sort of communicate about that. And I think this is where the role of art and design can play. Of course, we're living in times where these legal actors emerge more and more, and they operate beyond the scale of our visual perception. And I think this is really something that, we do have to deal with it, because we cannot smell it, we cannot taste it, we cannot see it or hear it. I mean, there's no way that we sort of can detect it. And I think from that perspective, it's an incredible challenge.
Yeah. Great. So this is this idea then that I actually love this aspect you're pointing to, which is the contrast or the sort of tension between something nano and then something planetary and hyper object. And perhaps, yes, as you say, we need art and design to help us make that imaginative leap between these two concepts, how something so tiny can have these profound effects, which we're right in the middle of discovering right now, aren't we? I mean, the data is coming in daily. So it's an incredibly timely topic to be involved in. Now, Lauren,
maybe I just tell you, I'm jumping in, because it's also, as a matter of fact, combining things between these 5 institutions, right? Like, I mean, the aspect that the sort of effect is on planetary scale makes immediately also sort of a joint, let's say, agency. I mean, we are all interested in, facing this challenge. We have an agenda.
Well, this will just be really interesting, I think, to see how this project evolves and how these different institutions with different approaches, different philosophies, different backgrounds can cross-contaminate one another in this exploration. So I think it's going to be very rich in that respect. But I want to come back to the art and design tackling microplastics as an issue and turn this over to Lauren now. Niels mentioned the sort of the role or the way in which art and design can visualize, so sort of bring something that may be invisible or out of our familiar experience into the public imaginary. What other things is it that art and design can do here that you imagine might unfold over the course of this project?
Yeah, I think what was important for us I mean, taking a few steps back when we started to develop this theme within design education, was to think about kind of what themes also would be interesting for students to look into. And I think that was also something for us, considering plastic. First, plastic as we usually know it, or as like I know it from my design education, has always been issues around plastic recycling and kind of like how to reuse plastic. But then I think the focus more specifically on microplastics as being an under kind of research topic was also interesting for us. And then of course, the aspect of designers working together with scientists and people from different disciplines to be able to think about how to visualize indeed a topic which is completely invisible, which is definitely a challenge. And we're going to have to see how and invent our own language and visual vocabulary to explore that further. But in our experience, it's been really valuable working with different collaborators in bringing kind of external collaborators into the classroom to at least make a start to kind of mapping out and trying to kind of point to different networks in which these issues kind of permeate. So maybe just initially we would be able to kind of identify not only the microplastics issue, but also how that connects more broadly to other industries or maybe unexpected actors that we'd never thought of before. So I think for us, just visually mapping out, but then also maybe inventing our own kind of way of looking, our own perspective and own way of creating narratives related to this very complex global narrative or global issue, sorry.
Yeah, I would expect that would be the case. I don't think, the idea of trying to visualize it without the power of narrative or something, the use of image over time, I think it is going to be very difficult. So this idea of sort of narrative in motion and with all of the range of sort of research tools at hand, I think is going to come into play. So I also wanted to understand better, maybe Niels, you could jump in here. Why justice? Why, as we've covered, why the plastic, but what is the justice aspect of this project? You mentioned legal actors before. Does it relate to that or to climate justice, or what's the thinking there?
Well, of course, if we're talking about justice, we're also talking about crime. And in the end, we're also talking about, committing crimes. And we also have to sort of ask ourselves, who are the actors involved? And I think it's interesting to sort of see that, we all part of this crime, right? Like, I mean, there's of course a cause and effect. And but we are in fact also the consumers as much as the industry, as much as the politicians who are actually sort of in fact just framing and trying to sort of give in a framework where we operate. I mean, this needs to be readjusted because of course if it all comes down to the effect of health being under as a health threat, then I think then we really just need to understand that we have to change something about it. And I guess the power also is to do it by legal means, and that's I think where I'd also like to sort of see and understand this sort of to quote, I think a good friend of ours, Susan Shupley, who was saying like, can you bring an iceberg to court? I mean, how far does climate change? Is that something that there are people involved who really have who are culpable for their actions?
Alice, could I ask you a question?
Yeah, sure. You ask it Niels or me?
You, Alice.
Yeah.
So you've been involved in your project at KBK, the Design in the Deep Future. So I thought maybe it might be useful for you to tell us what that is very briefly, and maybe because the question you asked to me, sort of like what design methods can we use to visualize or to better understand this issue, maybe like some of the things that have come up in your project might be useful for us and all those designers listening out there.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, basically, I have a research project that I've called Design in the Deep Future, which it actually does just what Niels described in a way, sort of taking a different look at design instead of just looking at design as a perfect, complete object that gets used, you know, for a very brief amount of time. To actually try and understand it as something that comes from a material, and before that matter, and then needs to be broken down afterwards into matter, and how long you know, it will have implications, serious, profound implications on the planet and as we're seeing with this topic in the human body. So we're kind of stretching out of time is what I'm interested in, and I'm using the term deep time to refer to a geological concept of a sort of inconceivable amount of time that how geology works through. So that's the larger project, and I'm interested within that, I suppose, in things like digital waste and some other topics are space junk, which actually my background looks rather similar to that. But among them all, we look at plastics and microplastics specifically. So yeah, this is great that it kind of intersects with a research interest of mine. And what I do is I work with tutors and students and all kinds of people to I suppose I'm really interested in zooming in on the methods used to conduct research, and it does get a bit meta sometimes, and but in this kind of context I think it's okay to talk about it. But you know, just thinking through what is it that art and design brings to a research inquiry, right? So sure, you talked earlier about collaboration with scientists, and that's super interesting, and that can be worked out in many different ways. What we don't want, of course, though, is to be the illustrators for the scientists, because that's not so interesting. But there are other things I think that happen when we take methods from the humanities and the social sciences, whether it's interviewing, whether it's embedded participatory research, whether it's something like walking as a research method, which I'm really interested in right now, or whether it's digital methods, these kinds of things. I think when it gets put through a designer's sensibility and a design lens, it shifts slightly and allows, it has new capacities. And these are a little bit tricky to kind of precisely put your finger on what it is. But I think anyone who's conducted research, looking through the eyes, you know, as acknowledging themselves as an artist or a designer and doing that research, knows that something happens, something's different. And I try and go about, I don't want formulas, I don't want little lists of steps, of recipes or anything like that, but I do quite like to capture people's experiences of working in this way, and that's part of the work I do.
But I think what is really interesting, Alice, because it's indeed the deep future, right? Like that's sort of the title. What it all somehow tackles is this understanding of time. And of course, that's also where science and artists have to deal with. If we are dealing with matter that goes beyond the lifetime of ourselves. And this is, of course, like an understanding that we haven't yet somehow mastered, especially sort of if you look at the industry and the production and consumption also of objects. I mean, we do actually have no clue what happens with elements or matter that we have created and just, I don't know, goes beyond our sort of perception. How do you think can we deal with that?
Well, my first reaction to that is, and this is tricky when you're working with artists and designers, because they usually really want to make something very quickly. And it's not that I'm against making, because obviously that is a form of research and you can work towards answers, but usually new questions iteratively, right? You can use the design or the art practice to explore these questions. But in general, because I've got the stage right now, I would say I'm not really a solutionist kind of person. And I think a lot of the time I'm urging for pause, well, Donna Haraway puts it very well, staying with the trouble, getting in amongst all of this trash and filth and mess that we've made and understanding it before we figure out these sort of ultimate solutions. So I know the speakers today are going to come from all different perspectives and bring all different views on this, and that's fantastic. And I think that's what it takes, actually, is a multitude of approaches. But I'm just saying with mine, I think it's about dwelling and understanding the issue and helping, like I said at the beginning, to try and create a nuanced understanding of the issue in the public imaginary. That's my goal anyway.
Lauren, do you want to share a bit more also about the experience that we had with our collaborators? I mean, because of course we have been.
I just had a first thought before you continue. The plastic behind me is in a museum, and this is from 1860. So it just occurred to me, just maybe, Alice, it's the same plastic that's behind you. Do you think that's possible?
I like that. I like that thought a lot. Although, and yes, and that is indeed the idea, is to sort of think about how things leak out of these perfect forms that designers put them into, designers as we, and how they're used and how they then start leaking out, literally, physically, as we're seeing with microplastics, but also kind of conceptually, and you know, when our idea of when something becomes trash happens in the mind before it does physically. You've trashed something conceptually before you throw it out. So yes, I love that linkage you're making. Although this plastic that was developed in the 1800s is a far nicer kind of plastic. These are the sort of the proto forms of I've forgotten the name of this one, but it builds up to Bakelite, right?
Yeah, Parkazine it's called.
Parkazine. Yeah, Parkazine. Yeah, not quite as.
No, Alice,
go ahead, Nick.
Sorry, I just wanted to say, I mean, now that you're telling the history of plastic, you also have to mention, of course, like the plastic conglomerate, I assume, because of course, yeah, it seems that The Hague has a rather famous reputation.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I was just making a point that what has happened, unfortunately, as often is the case, as people were frustrated with the kind of plastic that's behind you because it was very brittle and could only be used for certain products. What happened is we got better and better at making it more and more flexible and usable and mass producible and disposable. And so that's what has led to the situation that people are going to explain to us today in more scientific terms about its sort of the way friction can make it erode into these little particles that are all around us. But yes, so the plastic conglomerate is my friend. He's this nasty beast, which is the newest form of rock, and it's made. They're finding it a lot in Hawaii at the moment because you have a lot of volcanic lava there. And what's happening is that it's a mixture, a sort of entwined entanglement of natural sediment like rocks and things like that, and sand, but with molten plastic. So you end up with this nasty sort of, like I think of it as a sort of legacy or inheritance that we, as the era of mass production, the Anthropocene, what we're sort of giving to our future, which is this fusion of nature and culture and plastic and rock, and it's called plastaglomerate. So yes, I do dwell on it quite a lot, Niels, you're right, and I find it quite hard to get past, because it somehow sums up the sort of, in so many ways, the mistakes we've made.
Well, I guess it also offers the solution, right? Like if it's sort of the fusion, if the problem is the fusion, then probably our approach to it should be similar.
Well, I'm glad you brought this up, because I have a slightly, maybe slightly contentious or provocative point that I really want to be, maybe just as a footnote to this entire project, if anyone's interested in it. And it's really the idea that it may not be the ultimate, it may not be only one way of going about this, which is to kind of separate out the plastic particles from our existence, right? I noticed that the language that's being used around microplastics already, just as it is with coronavirus, by the way, is very military. It's very much us and them. We've got to sort of attack the problem, remove the pollutant, etc. And of course, that's a natural reaction. But I'm finding the sort of reading I'm doing at the moment a lot about fungi, along with a lot of other people, I think, and specifically the work of Anna Singh, who's an anthropologist, and she's written a book called The Mushroom at the End of the World. And she's really drawn my attention to the fact of how interconnected we are, not only with the nice things like the trees and the birds and the animals, but also the trash and the toxins and the waste. And what fungi does is it figures out a way to coexist. And she sort of develops this idea of ferality, being a feral an inhabitant of the earth. And I'm not saying we have to sit back and relax and just let microplastics invade and the rest of it. But I do think it's an alternative to the solutionist military kind of, we've got to extract everything, maybe to try and understand how it is part of this bizarrely ever-evolving coexistence that we find ourselves in. And it's similar conversations going on with the immunologists and the people studying the virus, I think, right now. And it's not something I'm equipped to talk about in any scientific way, but more in a kind of mostly metaphorical and possibly, as a reference point, I suppose, this idea of contamination. So I'm just going to lodge that there in your chat or in the world of this, and see if it develops any.
Well, you were referring, as a matter of fact, Alice, you were referring, of course, to Donna Haraway, and I think, if there's anything that of course, she's famous for is the Cyborg Manifesto. So the fact that we, in fact, already like inhaling and eating and God knows what plastic, I mean, we probably are already the sort of plastic cyborgs anyways.
Exactly. And this is not, and again, this is certainly not something to celebrate at all. And I'm not saying that. It's just more like, again, that idea of sort of making sure we spend enough time understanding where it is we are before we depart onto our various solutionist kind of
well, I think it's also
with that note, I think
we have
I have the role of the timekeeper. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you. Yeah, no, I see we've run quite a schedule.
Yes, so we have to move on. Thank you very much, Niels, Alice, and Lauren. It was very interesting to listen to you. I just want to point out that in the chat, Dr. Raymond was very much agreeing with design not as a communication tool. And I think that is important to frame it, and for the students that are participating in the project to think about that long term, like that action doesn't always concur in this communication and this like hands-on militaristic solutions, as you put it, Alice.
Yeah, thanks Raymond for sharing that thought indeed. Yeah,
Madhuri, I am going to introduce you and ask you to take the floor. I picking up my notes here. So Madhuri Prabhakar, you can correct me if I'm pronouncing it wrong, is a campaigner. No? Okay. Is a campaigner for the Beat the Microbead campaign by the Plastic Soup Foundation. This campaign is against the use of microplastics in cosmetics, and she's begun working at the foundation 4 years ago and hopes to have the future of beauty industry to be completely microplastics free. Take it away.
Yeah. Is it all right to share a presentation?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Just a second. Let's see if I can do it on a presentation mode.
There you go.
Yeah, it works.
Yep.
Okay. Just a second. Yeah. Let's do it like this. Is it possible for everybody to see?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, okay. Hello, everybody. This is Madhuri, and yeah, as Isabel said, I'm a campaigner at the Plastic Soup Foundation for their Beat the Microbead project. I've been working there for 4 years, and today I'm here just to give you a slight picture of microplastics, what they are, where they end up, what they do in our environment, and all of that. But before I go into this presentation, I just want to start with some facts and kind of give you an overall picture of what's happening with plastic in general in the environment, and then we'll go more into microplastics. So I'm going to start strong and straightforward with the big facts that is currently happening, which is we're putting 8 million tons of plastic into our oceans every year. This is an issue because, as we all figured out by now, plastic is something that takes forever to disintegrate or at all integrate in the environment. It takes about 500 to 1,000 years to do so. So we're creating or have created a material that will outlive all of us, and all the plastic that has ever been produced still exists in some form of shape in our planet right now. Only 1% of this plastic that is entering our oceans is actually floating on the surface. About 99% disappears immediately under the water or get trapped into coastal environments. But how does this plastic actually end up in the ocean? About 80% of this waste is actually land-based. And all of this comes or starts at land and any part of our countries, and through our rivers end up in the ocean. Plastic coming from rivers is one of the main sources of how plastic ends up in the environment or in our oceans. Now let's talk about what actually happens to the plastic which reach our waters or oceans. It breaks down. It breaks down because into smaller and smaller pieces, and there are many factors that might happen in the ocean. That could be the UV radiation or the movement of the waves or the currents. It reacts with salt as well, that makes it disintegrate. And maybe only because of time, because it spends so much time in the ocean and contributing to all of these factors, it breaks down into smaller and smaller pieces. So all the plastic that ends up in our ocean, be it plastic bottles or bags or containers, they break down into smaller pieces that are known as microplastics. So what are microplastics actually? The fact that microplastic ended up in the ocean and that's where it was found in the beginning, that's the context where the first definition of microplastics in a very scientific term came in. So microplastics are loosely defined as plastic particles that are smaller than 5 millimeter. And that's the context of the definition. That's just the kind of plastic or microplastic that are first found in the environment. This is the reason why microplastics are maybe even a bigger problem in our times than plastic pollution in general. And that's because microplastics are small, and once they are released in the environment, it's almost nearly impossible to clean them up entirely. So that makes it a big problem. Well, a lot of people feel that plastic soup or plastic pollution in the ocean looks like this. It actually looks like this because plastic is everywhere in all kinds of waters and all kinds of parts of the ocean on our planet. It is estimated that approximately 5.25 to 50 trillion microplastics are in the ocean at the moment. But as you can see, this range is quite huge and massive because actually it is quite difficult to get an exact number of how many microplastics there are in the ocean because they also keep breaking up with time. So there is no way to know the exact amount of microplastics there are in the ocean. Other estimations say that there are about 46,000 pieces in every square mile of ocean, weighing up to 269,000 tons. These are big numbers to digest and even hard to visualize. But yeah, this is what's happening. Well, all the plastics that do end up in the ocean and break down into smaller pieces are actually known as the secondary microplastics because they were not intended to become or enter the ocean in that shape or size. So all the secondary microplastics are microplastics that break down from bigger pieces of plastic that enter the ocean. But there are also some other not obvious sources of marine microplastic pollution, and they are called primary microplastics because they were intended and manufactured in that size. And well, ahead, I will give you more examples of these primary kind of microplastics. So this is how the scientific community or the conversation around microplastic is divided into the primary and the secondary microplastics. There are big 5 sources of these microplastics that kind of makes up the percentage of microplastic pollution. First, let's talk about clothes and textiles. 60% of the clothes we wear are made of synthetic materials like polyester or nylon. And when you put them in your washing machine, they lose plastic microfibers. Microplastics from textiles can also come from other sources like your clothes, your carpets or furniture, because they're also textile and fabrics. That's where it loses microplastics or microfibers from, and they can be lost because of friction or touch of your hands. Even can lose a lot of microfibers from fabrics and textiles. One way to kind of combat this problem, or like what you can do about it, is wash your clothes less, or because then you'll, of course, it will release less microfibers, or to wear secondhand clothes because secondhand clothes tend to lose less microfibers because the first 5 or 4 washes of a newly made fabric release the most amount of microfibers in your washing machine. Or you can put a microfiber filter in your washing machine to prevent that. Then there is cosmetics or personal care products like facial scrubs, toothpaste, shampoo, and even makeup contains microplastics. Manufacturers add microplastic to these products as emulsifying agent or viscosity agent, or just as cheap fillers. Sometimes plastic in your cosmetics bind them together or improve their texture. Even the most expensive brands have microplastic ingredients in them. So it's not something like a cheap brand has microplastics just because it's cheap. As part of my campaign, Beat the Microbead campaign, we have introduced last year an app called Beat the Microbead app, and it's free to download, and you can scan the ingredients of your cosmetics and personal care products, and the app lets you know if there are microplastics in there. And that way, you can always scan your products before you buy them and see if they contain any microplastics. Another source is tires. Car tires are made from a mix of natural and synthetic rubber, and they wear and tear during use. A single tire will wear around 1.5 kilos before it has to be replaced by a new one. So where does all of these wear and tear go? these tiny microplastics end up in the air and are almost impossible to clean up. So for now, there is no effective solution to kind of combat this problem. But one of the recommendations that experts give is to reduce your speed while driving. That can help reduce the amount of friction it has and the amount of microplastics it will let go of. Of course, the another one is plastic packaging or plastic product packaging that ends up in the ocean, as I just mentioned. That's another source of microplastics. 50% of all plastics is single-use plastic and only 9% has ever been recycled. So yeah, these bottles, containers, they break down over time in the ocean. And yeah, that's one of the biggest sources of secondary microplastics in the ocean. That's why it is important to even introduce systems like deposit return schemes that can recover at least plastic bottles that end up in the ocean or in the environment. So that's one of the way that can be prevented. Another less obvious source is paint. Paint is used on all kinds of buildings, boats, roads, everywhere. And of course, one of the reasons why paint releases microplastics is also because of wear and tear due to the weather conditions or just with time. And then there is this source of microplastic called Nerdles, which is kind of becoming more and more of a topic now. This is, I don't know if you probably have noticed these little tiny beads looking like plastic in coastal areas already. Nerdles are called, or plastic pellets. They are also smaller than 5 millimeter, and they're used as a kind of a raw material to kind of produce and manufacture all kinds of plastic products or yeah, packaging. They are shipped in huge containers all over the world. And one of the ways why they end up in the environment is because there's a lot of spillage in the sea or in the way it's transported, starting from the factories and manufacturing units. There is spill in the entire life cycle of Nerdles, and that's how they end up in millions and billions in the environment. In EU alone, up to 23 billion Nerdles end up in the environment every day. We in the Netherlands, Plastic Zoo Foundation has started doing research on this topic as well. The video is not working, but yeah, so we went to a lot of factories in the Netherlands that produce Nerdles, and we went looking around them, and there's so many spillage of Nerdles everywhere around that factory. If you go around the area, you can see like this Nerdle sand kind of yeah, ecosystem around the factories, and it's something that we started to take legal action against and make manufacturers responsible to prevent the spillage of Nerdle in this entire life cycle. But where do all of these microplastics end up when they get to the environment? What kinds of places are we talking about? They have been found almost every part of the Earth. There is no part on the Earth that is free of plastic pollution or microplastic pollution. In recent years, scientists have tracked microplastics to thousands of locations. There are rivers and beaches, you can find microplastics there. All along the coasts around the world. Ocean microplastics can also be found at the surface, but also throughout the whole column in the ocean. They have been found in the deepest point of our Earth, which is at Mariana Trench. That's 11 kilometers underwater. They have also been found at the top of the mountains, like Mount Everest, Himalayas, Pyrenees, US national parks. Microfibers have been found all of those places. It has also been found in soil. A lot of the time, our water treatment plants are not able to filter all the microplastics, but the microplastics they do filter they become the part of the sludge. So sludge is kind of the material that's all the solid kind of material that is collected through our water treatment plants. And in many cases, those sludge is applied to our agricultural lands as fertilizers. And that's one way how microplastics are ending up in our soil, and through that also to our fruits and vegetables. So at this point, we do know, and Niels mentioned it very briefly as well, that we know that microplastics have been found in our food, in our water, and in our air. Now the big question is what they actually do in the environment, what their effects are, and what their effects are on our bodies. And a lot of the experts on this panel will talk about that shortly. So yeah, I'm looking forward to all of the discussion. So thank you very much. And of course, if you have any questions, you can find a lot of information on our website, but also I'm here to, yeah, answer those. Thank you.
Thank you, Madhuri. Lauren, you are gonna manage this.
Yeah. Hey, Madhuri, thank you very much for your presentation. I just had a question about your Beat the Microbeads campaign. Maybe you could explain a little bit more about that, specifically your victories that you've had coming out of that campaign regarding eliminating microbeads.
Yeah, just to start with, we started in with this campaign, we started around I think 2011 or 12. And when we started, we were only talking about microbeads, and microbeads are a bit different than microplastics used in cosmetic sense, because microbeads have very specific function in products like scrubs or toothpastes, and they have this scrubbing kind of function. But microplastics can be used for any purpose and any amount in products. So when we started with microbeads, of course, we were just fighting the tip of the iceberg. Today, we know that there are more than 500 kinds of microplastic that are used in cosmetic and personal care products. And that's the only one that we are kind of aware now. We continually do research into what kinds of ingredients used in microplastics, in cosmetics. So yeah, that number keeps growing and growing. And with microbeads, there are many countries around the world who have taken legal action against them, and they're banned in countries like Sweden or UK. But yeah, again, it's just tip of the iceberg, and we're talking about a very small amount of microbeads as compared to microplastics that are used in personal care products.
There's actually a question here in our chat from Renata, who's listening, and she's just wondering about the cosmetic industry in general. I wonder if you could share a little bit more about the kind of awareness that exists in the cosmetic industry, like in which other kinds of cosmetics can we actually find microplastics?
Absolutely, all kinds. There are, I think, everything that you can imagine may or can contain microplastics, but doesn't mean that they do and have to. Of course, there's a large part of the industry that does use those ingredients, but there are also brands that do not. So as part of Beat the Microbead campaign, what we also do is kind of give this acknowledgement logo to brands that do not use those microplastic ingredients at all. So for now, we have around 110 brands that we kind of provided with our Zero Plastic Inside logo. So there are brands out there that are doing good and are not using any of these ingredients. So it's possible. But on a larger level, yeah, it's still used very, very widely at this moment, yeah.
I'm going to pitch in. There's another question that Libby Higgins is writing here. Are the effects of microplastics reversible, or can we only improve upon how we use plastics in the future? This might be a question for the next panelists, but I'll leave it with you anyway.
Yeah. As I said in my presentation, microplastic problem is, to me, it feels more urgent, because that's something that I feel that it's irreversible damage because of its size, that once it's out there in ocean, you're not gonna be able to retrieve it. Or in rivers, for example. There are certain solutions and innovation coming with tools to kind of stop microplastics from the rivers so it doesn't enter in the ocean in the first place. But yeah, the moving forward would be to kind of rethink ways we use these particles and how we can stop it at the source. That's kind of what our organization do as well. We try to look at the plastic problem and see how we can stop it at the source before it's already a problem in the ocean or rivers or whatever. So yeah, talking about cosmetics as well, then there to stop it at the source would be to not use or those microplastics, or just stop using products that do contain microplastics.
Madhuri, I know, of course, that your organization is sort of trying to sort of, also beat microplastic on a sort of legal level. I would like to come back to this justice aspect. And of course, can you share a bit like what is the challenge of actually, really how hold this industry accountable for their doing?
In terms of cosmetics, for example, we are also very legally involved because there is a European level investigation going on at the moment in intentionally added microplastics. So these are microplastics that are intentionally added to products like paint or detergents or cosmetics. And there we find it very challenging to even agree with the industry on something as basic as defining microplastics. So that's already a challenge to even kind of define the problem to even able to fix it. So there are a lot of there's heavy lobbying and it's very difficult to come up with on an agreement. But there are restriction processes happening now, so that's something way better than if we compare 5 to 10 years ago. But there is still a lot to do, and there's a lot of challenges to be faced in that.
There is one question in this line. You talked about seeking legal action against Nerdles at the industry level, but how much personal accountability do we all have in this issue? Posed by Luis Grosan.
With Nerdles, that's something that that's where, let's say, consumer is removed, because this is not the direct problem that consumers are facing with. Nerdles are, as I said, a raw material to make plastic products, and that's something that's happening on a very industrial manufacturing level. So their government intervention is very much needed, and for industry to also realize the kind of pollution they are creating, and that needs to be stopped. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to, at least in the Netherlands, involve local government and environmental agencies and deal with the manufacturers, talk with them, and get them to clean up the mess they made, and take extra precautions to not let them escape their factories.
Okay, maybe another question, Madhuri, of course, maybe from the side as a designer, I was wondering, what do you think from a perspective of an NGO can we offer to you as a sort of, designer, artist, you call it, people who are visually engaged? What do you think could be the benefit also of collaborating with students of young age and also visually great?
I think because as we work with an NGO, and sometimes we get very caught up into the scientific or like the factual way of moving people. What design can help is to give a different kind of intervention to the problem. And as your discussion kind of come through with Alice, is to visualize the problem in a way that moves people differently, that would drive them or motivate them to change, kind of. So that's where it would be interesting.
Imagine also alternatives, I guess, right? Like
exactly.
Yeah.
To kind of for us, it's like, of course we have the knowledge, but to give the creative aspect, creative imagining, to kind of not solve the problem, but to bring forward it. That's something that really excites me.
I don't know if Alice is still here, but is there something you would like to respond to? Or did she probably...
We need to cut.
That's also good. It's fine.
Just so we have a 5-minute break, there is one more question from Ignacio Mateo. If Maduri, do you consider football or sports artificial turf made from small pieces of tires a big source of microplastics? I would ask if you could maybe answer on the chat so that we
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah. I will do that.
And be sure just to copy everybody, all attendants. And then
Yeah.
we have a 5-minute pause now, so that at 3 sharp, we start with our next block. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Maduri.
Thank
You're
you,
welcome.
Maduri, and thank
Glad
you so
to be
much.
here.
Okay, welcome back. Now I've resumed the recording, and we are starting with the effect of microplastic block now. And I would like to welcome Martin Thiel, that's here with us today. Let me just briefly find my notes. Martin Thiel is a marine biologist with strong interest in the behavioral ecology of marine invertebrates and the functioning of marine communities. The large amount of floating marine litter encountered during their research and the complete lack of scientific information about marine litter from the Southeast Pacific led him and his team to include this topic as their investigation. So in 2007, they founded the citizen science program Científicos de la Basura, Litter Scientists, which has since been expanded to other countries along the East Pacific. Welcome, Martin. Nice to have you.
Yes, thanks. Thanks a lot for the invitation. And let me try to share my screen. Okay, I don't know. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. Okay, so this is the title of the talk that you guys asked me for. And before I go into my talk, I would like to declare that I'm a marine biologist interested in all kinds of ecological aspects. And one of the things that we have been studying in our lab for a long time is these floating seaweeds and how they transport organisms around the oceans. And when we started this research, we also came across floating litter. And coming back to the shore, we realized, wow, there's a problem. But looking for information in Chile and in other South American countries for scientific information, we realized that basically nobody knew anything. There was no information. So then we continued for a number of years with our floating seaweeds, but at some point we realized we need to do something about this marine litter issue because no scientist, nobody was paying attention to that in Chile. And so we founded this program that is called Científicos de la Basura en las Playas. Means basically litter scientists. And with this project, we have done a number of studies together with school children from all over Chile, which is about 5,000 kilometers of coast. So it's from basically, if you are in Europe, from the North Cape to the north of Africa. So that's a spatial scale. And so we have generated scientific information. And if you are interested in this, you can go to this website and find it there. And since we are working with children, the questions we have been using or we have been trying to answer are the same questions as everybody is asking them, but we have been trying to make it as simple as possible. So for example, where does this litter come from? The question could be very complicated, the answer, to find the answer to that, but you could also make it very simple. basically, is it from nearby or is it from somewhere else? So, for example, if you look at this picture, you can see there's litter on the beach that has no organisms growing on it. And then you have this bottle that has a number of marine organisms growing on it, and these organisms are large. So this bottle actually has come through the ocean with the currents and come from far away. Whereas the other litter that you can see on this picture has no organisms on it, so it has not come with the currents. It's most likely been deposited by users of the beach or has been thrown into the ocean very close by in the same bay and then thrown onto the beach by the waves. So this, of course, then organisms growing on litter is also a reason of concern to people, because with this litter, the organisms can travel over very long distances, and those could be invasive species. And if you pick up some of this litter here, for example, this buoy open at the sea, you can sometimes find these invasive species, for example, this green alga here, that is one of the most invasive seaweeds all around the world, codium. And we also can find it attached to floating plastics. Then maybe you have heard about the litter that was released by the tsunami. And with this litter, a lot of organisms have crossed the North Pacific Ocean. Many, many species have been shown to travel on this litter and come from Japan to North America. So that's what's happening with large litter, with macroplastics. And another thing that's happening with macroplastics is, of course, entanglement that you have all heard about. And many different organisms are affected, fishes, birds, mammals, and also a number of invertebrates. But today we are not going to talk about the effects, the impact of macroplastics, which is, as we have just seen, species, transport, and entanglement, but we are focusing on microplastics. That's what you asked me for. And so microplastics, the main concern is ingestion. Organisms are ingesting these small plastic pieces, whether they are primary, as you have heard in the first talk, or secondary microplastics. The main concern is ingestion and everything that's related to that. And so the question that we're going to focus on during the rest of my talk is whether ingestion of microplastics really is a problem. And as an overview, I want to cover these 4 questions. Who is ingesting? Why does it happen? Where does it happen? And is it really important? Do we have to worry about it? So let's first look at who is ingesting microplastics. Basically, you can say any organisms that you can imagine will ingest microplastics. It has been documented from fishes, from seabirds, from mammals. And nowadays, this figure is actually already 5 years old. And so now we know that also a lot of invertebrates like worms, mussels, corals, all kinds of organisms ingest microplastics. And we have heard about the sizes. So generally what people consider is that 5 millimeters and smaller is microplastics. And so you can see here on the scale here, larger things, larger plastics are ingested by larger organisms, and smaller stuff is ingested by smaller organisms. So if we look at 2 important groups here, for example, fishes and bivalves like mussels, you can see that large fish ingest larger microplastics, and small fish larvae ingest also smaller stuff. And mussels here, you can see, ingest a lot of very small stuff. And that's where it also becomes complicated analytically, because it's very hard to determine, to analyze this. And just as like as a perspective, if you pick out now one of your hairs from your head and look how thick it is, it's about 0.05 millimeters thick, and there's still a lot of microplastics that's smaller, and those are the ones that are ingested by mussels and other bivalves like oysters, for example. And so why does it happen? And here we could go into a lot of detail. I will just show you one very simple slide. Here we are looking at a fish from Easter Island, and in this fish we found these blue fragments, microplastic fragments, and we also found a lot of these blue copepods. And in fact, we found a lot more blue microplastics in the fish than we found in the surrounding waters. So these fish actually are selectively ingesting these microplastics, which are similar to their prey organisms, these copepods that you see here. And so microplastics are confounded with food. And that's what you see all throughout the animal, basically the different organism groups. They confound the plastics, the microplastics with their food. Also, it happens in many seabirds. And then, of course, there can be indirect ingestion of microplastics through their prey. We will come back to that later. So we have seen it happens in fish, also in seabirds, and also in mussels. We want to look at the mussels. And here is an overview study that shows a whole suite of different mussel species, for all of which it has been documented that they ingest microplastics. And here it happens in the same way as with the fish, as the seabird. They confound these microplastics with their food. And so we can say that there is, So there is a problem, and microplastics enter the food chain in many different levels. So where does this happen now? Let's look at that now. And here you can see a map that many of you may have seen before, where the highest concentrations of microplastics are. And this is in the open oceans, where the large oceanic gyres, basically the gyre currents, concentrate these microplastics in the open ocean. Now, the important thing is, where do organisms feed? Organisms feed where there is basically their food. And if we look at where the productive areas are in the world's oceans, you can see that actually these oceanic areas are actually very, very low productivity. And the highest productivity is in the coastal oceans. So in the open ocean, something that is happening everywhere is that currents concentrate stuff, all kinds of stuff. Currents concentrate plankton organisms, but currents may also concentrate microplastics and other plastics. So here you can see, for example, these lines where currents have generated these fronts. They are also called slicks. And so in this study, for example, these colleagues, they looked at these slicks where the currents concentrate stuff, as you can see here in this schematic figure. And so they took samples in these slick zones and outside of these slick zones. And you can see here on the right side, the light blue is the slick zones and the darker blue is the outside area. And you can see that in the slick zones, the plastic concentration is much higher than outside. The same happens actually with the larval fish. Inside, there's many more larval fish than outside these slick zones. So microplastics and these organisms are concentrated. And so that's actually then where these conflicts happen, where ingestion may happen. And here you can see in these frontal zones, everything is concentrated, the food and the plastics, And here is one thing that is very important, and that luckily also the former speaker emphasized. Once it is in the ocean, it is too late, because here the plastics in these areas where it is concentrated is intermingled with all kinds of organisms, and you can't take it out anymore, because you may actually do more damage to the ocean than if you leave it there. Because if you would take out the plastics, you would also take out all the organisms associated with these plastics. That's something very important to keep in mind. So here the plastics is interconnected, and here the risk of ingestion is specifically high, because to these areas is where the fish, the sea turtles, the seabirds, the mammals, everybody goes there to feed. And so that's where the risk of ingestion is very high. So now let's turn at the final and most important question. Do we really need to care? Is ingestion of microplastic a problem for all these organisms? So one question is that there may be trophic transfer through the food chain, so that the larger the organisms that are higher up in the food chain concentrate all these plastics in their body. And so that's one of the questions that is needs to be investigated. And so here, if you look at this figure, you see the trophic levels of different organisms and the amounts of microplastics. And you can see here higher trophic levels like predators. You see also higher numbers of microplastics per individual. And that could be because the microplastics accumulate in these organisms. However, these organisms of higher trophic levels typically are also larger. So then in this overview, this author actually concluded that looking at all the evidence, that there is no evidence that microplastics bioaccumulate in higher trophic levels. And so he suggested there is no trophic transfer through the food webs. And why should that be? Well, basically what is happening here, if you look at this schematic figure, again from Easter Island, you can see here flying fish that ingest sometimes microplastics. These flying fish are very important prey of tuna fish. And so the tuna fish ingest the microplastics indirectly through their prey, through the flying fish. But since the tuna fish is so large and the digestive system of the tuna is also so large, the small microplastics basically flush right through their gut system. So there is really no accumulation, because it goes right through out again. So what are other negative impacts that could happen in this? And so here is an overview study that showed that actually there is many studies that document that there is no real effect. Then there's a few studies that show negative effects. Of course, the important thing here to keep in mind is there's no study that shows positive effects. Okay, so there is some negative effect, but it's not so widespread as you might assume. So here, why could that be? Here we are looking again at the mussels, and here what these folks have done, they have fed the mussels with microplastics and with natural particles, like sediment particles, and at different concentrations. And basically the mussels do not care whether they ingest natural or microplastic particles. So here, the effect of ingesting microplastics is very low, because the mussels are used to typically ingest all kinds of stuff when they are filtering the water. Here in a similar study where the authors offered different concentrations, and they also didn't see any clear effect of higher concentrations of microplastics. So then the next question is actually that there may be contaminants that are absorbed to the microplastics. That's something that happens in the ocean and has been documented. And the concern is that when now these organisms ingest these contaminated microplastics that have other contaminants, that then these contaminants could desorb in the body of the organisms and contaminate the organism. That's here's a concern. And so there's contrasting evidence right now. As we have heard, we are just basically, there's still a lot of things that we don't really know. And that's really the main concern. So for example, this author suggested, based on his overview, that there is very little evidence that microplastics can be a vector for these other contaminants here, the persistent organic pollutants, to organisms. Here's another study that did show actually that microplastics do serve as a vehicle for some contaminants that show up in the body here of these juvenile zebrafish. And here's a similar study where they fed contaminated microplastics to the chicks of a seabird, and they found that here in those that obtained the contaminated or that ingested the contaminated microplastics, there is a concentration of these contaminants in tissues. Other authors again did something similar and found relatively limited effects. So here, the word is not really out, the final word on whether or not this is an important effect. So I would like to ask all of you now, what do you think? Is ingestion of microplastics a problem? Yes or no?
That's a great question.
I'm not qualified really to take the final call on this.
Yeah,
but give me one more minute.
Yeah.
So you can try to answer that question in the chat if you like right now. But I would like to give you one more thing to answer this question. Microplastic is only one of many other stressors out there in the ocean. We have, for example, many organisms are facing increasing temperatures. Then we have ocean acidification, we have eutrophication. So there's a whole suite of different stressors out there, and we need to pay attention to that, because adding one more stressor may basically tip the balance in the one or the other direction. So I would say, well, yes, my answer would be a tentative yes. We do need to be concerned about it, even though we don't have any very clear evidence that microplastic for some of these organisms is a very serious problem. So what can we say finally, summarizing? They do cause multiple impacts. It may be species specific. Some species or some life stages may be more sensitive than others. It will be habitat dependent. And also we need to keep in mind that there is synergies with other stressors. So microplastics is one more stressor in a stressed ocean, and probably the least necessary of all these stressors that are out there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Martin, for this fantastic presentation. I'm going to now give the word to Dr. Heather Leslie and Professor Dr. Raymond Peters, who are going to talk about the effect on humans. So your question, is ingestion a problem or not? Maybe can be addressed here. And when you guys are ready, we'll do a short question and answer with all three of you in the end of this hour.
Let me see where I find my presentation.
We're going to do a double presentation. Ray is going to start, and I'll take over halfway.
Yep, I have to find mine but I will in a minute.
Okay, I'll in the meantime just say that Professor Raymond Peters is an expert in immunotoxicology or immunotoxic effects of substances on inflammatory diseases such as allergy. His work balances between biology and chemistry and is separately required to solve chemical safety issues. Together with Heather Leslie, he will lead a European Commission project, Polyrisk, to develop knowledge and approaches to assess human health risk of micro and nanoplastics. And
I'm a bit struggling. Yeah.
I'm sorry, does Dr. Heather have the presentation as well? Maybe.
Yeah, she's.
I'm going to
Yeah.
share both. I'm going to share both.
No, I got it.
Oh, you got it?
Okay, I
Yeah.
can just say that
At least I
Dr.
got it.
Leslie is a leading expert in international microplastics research. And for almost 2 decades, she has been pioneering studies on how plastic and industrial chemicals can impact our ecosystem, food, human health, and society, and what can be done about it. Go ahead.
I'm a bit stuck now. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes.
we can hear you, but we cannot see the presentation.
I'm going to share the presentation.
No,
Or
my
no?
screen is a bit stuck, so I don't see anything now. I have to
We're losing you.
close a few
I think we're
things,
losing your
probably.
audio.
Let me check again because. Yeah,
Yeah, now we hear you well.
I have to leave and get back to you. Do you? I'm a bit stuck, so I have to.
Ray, why don't I just show your slides
Sorry.
and you can talk because we can hear you. Oh,
Maybe you can share our the slides anyway, and we hope that he can log in again.
yeah. What would you like, me to do mine and then he'll do his in
Yeah.
the opposite
Maybe-
order?
Yeah, maybe we can do that.
Okay. Need to be in Zoom, sorry. Okay. You can probably see this.
Yes, we can.
Okay. So Ray's going to talk about a new project that we have, which is quite exciting, and he'll talk a little bit more about the inflammation side. But we're a team of kind of chemistry and toxicology mixed.
Sorry.
Ray, I just started, so we're going to switch our roles.
Good.
Okay. Switch our order. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the human side of things. Are we a little bit plastic inside? Well, we've been talking about framing the plastic problem as a problem of the oceans, and for the last few years, we've really been doing our best to also show that it's we are a highly exposed species, and this is for the last few years been actually on the political radar. We can see here that what is this plastic stuff? It's a mixture actually of copolymers and the additives. This is what Martin was just talking about, and we've been studying these for decades. We know a lot about them, but what about these crumbs? A lot of these are substances of high concern, but these polymers or copolymers with different monomers, different building blocks, I call these basically the spaghettis and this the sauce. But we're kind of interested in what, if anything, are these little chunks of the noodles doing? And is it safe to breathe in and eat and digest plastic dust? The exposure to microplastic in the living environment, we know a lot more about the sea at the moment, but we have seen some early studies in the air, in food and drinking water. And it seems like everybody, when you look for microplastics, you can find them. Also, it wasn't a study done at our laboratory, but a study in human feces. And there's also plastics not only going in your body, but also going out. And this becomes a problem for sewage treatment plants. But of course, I should also say about all of these studies, they were really microparticles. So these were really measuring the largest possible particles. what we're interested in is what we call the bioavailable fractions. So when it gets into your body, the things that you don't poop out or pee out, but the ones that really reach your bloodstream and your tissues and your organs and get stuck there, where they might cause problems. And these are the smaller ones, the low micron and the nano, so smaller than a human hair. And I call this the analytical terra incognita here on the Lennox globe. Here be dragons, the areas that you can't really fill in what's going on there. And we've been interested in this for many years in trying to get down to increase our analytical power to look at these places where the dragons are. And sometimes I say, this is not a field for cream puffs, because it's really scary sometimes when you keep trying and you can't make these invisible things visible. But we did find a way. Very recently at our university in Amsterdam, and some other labs around the world are working very hard on this. And we're trying to improve the quality so that we can now study the real world microplastic exposure in humans. We've started by looking at blood and placentas and amniotic fluid and some other matrices. The first study was published about placenta, not by our laboratory, unfortunately, but some laboratory in Italy. And what we now have the ability to do is measure both micro and nano-sized particles for the high production volume polymers. We have an ability to measure very sensitively, because there isn't a whole lot of mass in a gram of your blood, but we are able to detect that. And we have what's very important and kind of boring for the outside world, but we need a lot of checks and balances, which we call quality assurance and quality control, to make sure that what we are measuring in a tissue is not something that got introduced during sampling or on the way to the lab or on the way to the measuring instrument. Because as you know, we live in a very plasticized world with our whole laboratory is basically built out of plastic. So we have to be very careful that our samples don't get dirtied with this plastic. If we find it in us, how bad is it? The two things we do is we look at concentrations that cause adverse effects, like chronic inflammation. Chronic inflammation is a sort of a theoretical way of looking at plastic particle toxicity, because it is something that happens when you're exposed to other kinds of particles, we know from air pollution studies. And then we want to see actually a really big difference with the concentrations measured inside humans, because if we are not very highly exposed, we won't reach the concentrations in our bodies that will cause adverse effects. Because of this relationship, the risk only comes when you're both exposed to something that's very hazardous. Just like the virus, if the virus is on the outside of your body, it's not measured inside your body, it's hardly able to cause any toxicity, and therefore you have no risk. But it's, of course, a virus is inherently, can be inherently toxic. So the basic particle toxicity hypothesis is that the particulates in general can lead to this inflammation by various steps in a cell. And when I found out about chronic inflammation, and that's a prelude to a lot of chronic diseases, I really want to make sure that plastic particles are not causing chronic inflammation and possibly chronic disease. So we are really in a pioneering phase right now. It's still a lot of terra incognita out there, but I would really like to get to the bottom of this question. And this is basically my bigger question. Are contemporary plastics applications congruent with our best science? Is this the best we can do to protect environment and human health? And when I started out working on this, we were talking about the Anthropocene. And then about 10 years later, it turned into the Capitalocene, which was maybe more descriptive. And then almost a decade later, we had the Catulocene, or however you pronounce it, which sounds a lot better to me, where humans teach themselves to live in full and rich harmony with their fellow beings, as Donna Haraway put it. That made me really interested, in transdisciplinarity, a new intellectual space, and that's why I really applaud your project. You approach it with an intent to solve complex problems, and there's many different benefits which I see for both art and science, which I've listed here a little bit. Mostly, I would say freedom from paradigms is a really big one, because you really get stuck in your paradigms, especially nowadays, and especially in chemistry. It's such a cameral science where we are kind of cut off from feeling what we're thinking, and sometimes even cut off from thinking. Sorry to put it so negatively. And I wanted to share just a 3-minute little video of becoming a sentinel species. You probably can't see this. I forget how to get rid of this thing at the top. But it's a quick little video of 3 minutes showing a recent art science project that we did at the intersection of the nature, the sea, microplastics, and our immune system. And then after this, we will go on to the poly-risk project, which will be presented by Raymond Peters. So now I have to turn this on.
I was fascinated with this concept of sentinel species. It's a term taken from environmental toxicology, which is using other species as indicators for how our environment is affected by pollution. They're kind of these canaries in the coal mines whose well-being and health condition can tell us something about of the ecosystem that we're affecting.
We live in an environment that's really plasticized. All of our products are generally made of plastic, and a little bit of our products get inside of us. So we are all a little bit plastic too inside. So we are actually potentially a very highly exposed species. Slowly, we're starting to realize that we could also become a sentinel species. And in fact, aren't we all sentinel species?
Our project is a science fiction film about 2 imaginary researchers who want to become sentinel species. And they do so by introducing microplastics from the sea to their immune system. This work is then mixed together with an actual scientific experiment where we extract macrophages from my blood, which are the sort of first responders of the immune system, and feed them with microplastic particles that can be found in our everyday environment.
A macrophage will react against everything that is dangerous to the body. They are big eaters. And the question that we have is what happens when macrophages actually eat microplastics?
Seeing in front of your eyes this sort of microscopic battle between my macrophages and the microplastics was just really crazy.
Actually, you should not work with your own blood. There's a convention that we shouldn't do that. But I can understand that it has a meaning for an artist. This has created a number of questions. Do you imagine that your macrophages are actually outside of your body right now and interacting with microplastics away from your own self? I can imagine that this has a deep philosophical meaning for an artist like Cecil.
It just brings another layer of importance and interest and curiosity into this whole realm that we study from a reductionist and non-emotional point of view.
Heather and Juan, who are also, I think, special unicorn scientists, they already have artists' mindsets, so they're really going full on with speculating along with me and think a little bit further than what we can say is actual scientific knowledge right now. So I think we're all sort of like wanting each other's job a little bit, which is good.
Okay, that's it from my side. I'm gonna give the floor to Raymond Peters.
Right. So hopefully it works now. Yeah, got it. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Good. So I go to the beginning. So thank you, Heather.
It's very big though.
It's too big?
It looks, we don't see like we see a detail of the slide.
Now you should see it, right?
Yes.
Is it okay now?
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you, Heather, for taking over. I was here all afternoon, but something went wrong. So let me say something about our new project that Heather and I are heading, and that will start in a month from now. And actually, it's dedicated to sort of understand how and if we are really exposed to nanoplastics, and what could that do to our health. You have seen probably this fish, and this fish in this picture is in Utrecht, where I work and live, and it alerted us, well, citizens of Utrecht, to become more aware of our problem. But the problem, as you heard, is even bigger than this. It's about micro and nanoplastics. And as you've heard from previous speakers, it may concern the particles, but also may concern the chemicals in the particles. So not only the polymers, but also all these additives that are in there to make a plastic, like catalyst or plasticizers, etc. In addition, these plastics may serve as a vector for not only chemicals, as Martin alluded on, but also microbes. And the next slide shows you maybe what it means if you think about it. This is a few pictures of sort of macrophages that also were shown by Heather. And here you see 3 photographs of macrophage-like cells, dendritic cells that contain microplastics. This is a bead of 10 micrometers. These are beads of 1 micrometer, and these are beads of really, really tiny size, 200 nanometers. And if you look at this table here, you see that these are in the same size as a virus. If you think that our virus now, SARS-CoV virus, has this relative size of 6 to 100 nanometers, which is smaller maybe than these particles, but in the same range. And here you see these plastics in the cells. So these little dots, red dots, are plastics, and you can imagine that they do something in these cells. They maybe disturb the action, the way they act in your body. And also here you see a picture of cells from the intestine in culture, in vitro, and you see all these dots here laying on your epithelial layer. Well, this could just be something like it, but we know that this may lead to all kinds of effects. We know from particulate matter that it can induce inflammatory responses. And we also know from all kinds of studies that particulate matter, and maybe not only plastic, but all the matter that we inhale or eat, may contribute to long-term effects. For instance, allergy, if you think about respiratory exposure. And we also know that it is a really complex matter we work with, because these effects of these plastics, they depend on the physical, chemical, and biological characteristics. So it's a really complex matter to study and to get a grip on. And that's why we started this project, PolyRisk. And in this project, we really want to know the risk, and in toxicology or in risk assessment, the risk is composed of hazard and exposure. So for assessing risk, we need to know more about the toxic effects, but also about the concentration at the target. So imagine the concentration in our blood, with our blood. We as humans are probably mostly exposed via the air, not so much via drinking water, although we don't know. But imagine that in the air, you have all these tire wears and all these pollutants in the air, and you cannot avoid exposure via the air. It goes in and it may never go out. Anyway, we don't know yet. So we have to assess the exposures via different routes. And that's what we, in our project, will do. Essentially, we will look at real human exposures and try to determine the chemical appearance, so the appearance of these micro and nanoplastics, any form, in our blood, and link that to possible immune responses. We will do a number of field studies with a number of groups over Europe. For field inhalation scenarios, we will do with indoor athletes in indoor soccer grounds, for instance, but also look at textile industry workers, and also do a drinking ingestion study. So just to know how and to what extent we are exposed, and whether that leads to an inflammatory response. So that's my short presentation. I just also want to stress that I really like to be involved in this, and I really admire that you students all will think about this. And this is a quote I found actually at the premises of the VU in Amsterdam, the Free University, so the University of Heather. And this I really like a lot. There's no science without fancy and no art without fact. And I hope that with your help, we and citizens become more aware of the problem. And for that, of course, we need an open mind. But also, I hope that in the future, with all the knowledge we have, we will get to a green toxicology view and maybe a circular by design. So think before you waste your product and use it well. So one solution I found, it just responds also to the presentation by Madhuri, there are some solutions. At least people think about solutions. Look at this, where they have came up with a device. It's not yet in production, but to collect at least the damage of the particles that we release from our tires. And also there are some solutions, and that's, well, I still like to think in solutions for this problem. There's also ideas that we can use maybe fungi to get rid of our plastics. But above all, we need to make sure that we waste less, of course, and produce less plastics. So that's what I had to say.
Perfect. Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Raymond and Heather. I would ask Martin also to turn on his screen so we can have a little question and answers. I have to say that while Dr. Peters was talking, he was also responding in the chat.
No, that's not me.
That was me. I just changed my name. I saw that I wrote that
okay.
You don't have a split personality.
With the double tasking here, but okay. That question was answered. If you could drink microplastics, or you could absorb them there. We have another question that came in: is do you think that our economic infrastructure could easily function upon a world without plastic? And this is a bit more open-ended. See if any of you feel like addressing.
I addressed it. I think probably as I don't know if I was anonymous. Sorry, Ray. I was like,
Heather, yes.
I was saying, never underestimate human ingenuity. And if you want something, you can of course get it done. And but of course, impossible things will take a little while longer to get done. That's general rule. But of course, we are kind of locked in many ways to this technology that's biting us back, and that's why it's going to take a long time. But I always, if I was talking to high school kids and I said, can you imagine, my grandmother or great grandmother, she wouldn't believe that I was standing here in this auditorium in the university, a woman with a PhD. And by the way, I even could vote in the election and everything. And that's like unthinkable until it actually happens. And so I try to help myself realize that, it's really hard to imagine, but it's certainly possible. And I think our future will not have the same types of plastics in it as we have now.
No, but it's also about indeed the type of plastics. I mean, if you have your sewer from non-plastic material, it may not. How we use the plastic nowadays. I remember that my mother kept all the plastic bags. She never threw away.
Okay, Raymond, we hear you
For a minute. I remember these plastic lids on your coffee cup. You throw it away.
I think it's better now. Martin wanting to say something, and then I have a question specifically for Martin. Go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to say, I think the goal is not to live in a world without plastic. The goal should be to make better use of the plastic, because plastic is fantastic as a material, right? Yeah. And so the problem really is generated by the misuse. And I think also the plastic issue and a lot of other issues here in Latin America about social issues, the COVID situation, for us is an opportunity to rethink our way of life. And actually Raymond showed a picture with this car with like trying to capture these microplastics, which I personally think, no offense, is the wrong way of thinking. In fact, I think Raymond is living in the city that is the paradise of mobilization. Yeah, the problem is not the microplastics, the problem, or the tire wear, the problem is our way of life. And also with respect to all the biopolymers, you know, where are they coming from? These supposed degradable plastics. It's just an issue of maintaining our way of life, throw away way of life. And that's the fundamental issue at the basis of everything. Everything in a way is connected to our way of life. And the plastic is just one of the symptoms of that. And so I would say, yes, of course, we should look for alternative products, better ways, better design, but also we should look and think about a different way of life. That's my...
I like my way of life right now, though, and I don't really want some eco-dictatorship to say this should be your way of life, you know? And so I think it's a little, I would like to say that I think it's naive to say that in 100 years we're going to use the exact same materials as we're using today. And I think we'll probably innovate something in material science between now and a century from now. And so but I also like to be open to all of the, I think everybody should experiment with their idea of how to solve the problem, because there's not a silver bullet. We need a huge, sometimes I call it a big tree of ideas, and we have to scale up the things that are working. And we need transdisciplinary discussions, because we need to get out of our paradigms of thinking that, well, we just have to change the way we live. Maybe we do, but maybe we don't. Maybe there's other ways. I can still ride my bike around Amsterdam without releasing microplastics every time my wheels turn, you know?
I hope so.
So I don't want to stop biking, but I want a better kind of tire, you know?
Yeah.
So you always have friction, of course. You always lose material.
Yeah.
And that's not a problem if it's within boundaries. I mean,
if it's a nutrient.
It's, well, for instance, if you think about the fungi that can eat plastics, who cares? You know? It's about the abundance that we produce. We produce so much that our system cannot really cope with it. So if we find a way to reduce the exposure or the appearance of plastics in what way or whatnot, and make it more circular. I mean, plastics are a product of nature, right? They are oil products. They originally come from plants. The oil is a plant-based material, but we sort of modify it in a way that it is not, well, we didn't think of the circular way of using plastics, which we should and have to, I think.
I have 2 or almost 3 questions, but we have to really wrap up, unfortunately, if we want to break before the next one. But one question posed by Katja is there evidence of microplastics contaminating fruits and vegetables? If so, does this elevate the impact on food change and therefore deepen the issue?
Yeah, well, it's a basic, well, Heather knows better, but it's basically present in all our food products except red wine.
Only drinking wine now.
No, but it's beer is also
I never tested red wine, just Chardonnay. But
yeah, someone did, I heard. So I've seen some data. Red wine is most clean, at least, but I'm not sure.
I think especially processed food contains the most. This is my hypothesis. I haven't tested everything, right? But I know during production, you know, you have big containers where the tomato soup is being made, and there's what we do in order to keep those blades rotating is we spray little Teflon microplastics on the rotors. So and it's called food contact microplastics. You're allowed to put it in your tomato soup. And there's just many ways. We tested organic honey, you know. But there's loads of microplastics in honey because they're packaged and they're transported in great big plastic bins, and the air fallout, you get a little bit of fallout in the air, and then, so the more processed the food is, I think the bigger the chance you'll have microplastics in it. I don't really worry myself too much about what's on the inside of an apple, because of the, although that's been proposed lately that microplastics can be taken up in roots. I think we need to do more research before we really conclude that, because if you think of a plant with a cell wall, it's different than an animal cell. It has this cellulose crunchy outer layer, and the pores are so small that it's very hard to get anything except for the tiniest nanoplastic through those cell walls. So I think plants actually have an extra line of defense, but I'm not sure about it. But we have hardly any studies on that.
Thank you very much. There is one more question that I am going to ask, since Heather has been so good at the chat, if you could answer in the chat, so we can all get 5 minutes before the next session starts at 4 o'clock sharp. We will start with the first counterculture block. So we'll keep seeing you all there in 5 minutes. Thank you for your participation, all three of you. It's been wonderful to have you.
Thanks for having us.
Happy that we could have some of the interdisciplinary discussions here.
So that my title was Microplastics in EU Policy, but actually my presentation is a bit narrower because we don't take care of the EU policy at the European Chemicals Agency, but we do propose restrictions on microplastics. And how to move to the next. Okay, first, before I go to microplastics, I just want to say a few words about ECHA and what we are. We are one of the decentralized EU agencies like the European Food Safety Authority and the Medicines Agency. And we were set up in 2007 to manage 2 European chemicals regulations. And we're located in Helsinki, Finland. And you can see here our beautiful new, it's a 1-year-old new office building, which we had a chance to stay for a couple of months before the pandemic. So it's now empty, and then my home office here close to Helsinki, and we have a very nice winter, a lot of snow and freezing weather. So it might not be the same as what you have there in different parts of Europe. And what do? We protect you and the environment by taking action on harmful chemicals. And as mentioned, we started with 2 regulations, and now we manage principally 4 chemicals laws, but also parts of 4 other regulations, like the Waste Framework Directive as an addition. And then microplastics at EU level, the big picture. There are several actions on microplastics as part of the EU plastic strategy, which was agreed in 2018. And this strategy aims at better design of plastic products and higher recycling rates. And the Single-Use Plastics Directive is one of the initiatives. I think it kicks in already this year with the straws. The plastic straw should be banned, and the Commission is investigating particle loss from tires. That's one initiative. And an action for my employer or my agency was to develop a restriction proposal for microplastics that are intentionally added to products. And this has already been referred to in some of the presentations today. And we did an investigation on this topic, and we submitted a restriction proposal in January 2019. And a few words about restriction under the REACH regulation. The word itself probably brings to mind as the first thing a ban, but a restriction is not necessarily a ban. It can be any condition on manufacture, import, or use. And it tackles the risk that is not currently controlled in the EU. And it can be initiated either by ECHA on request of the Commission or by EU member states. So we as an agency, we don't propose ourselves anything, but we do what the Commission asks us to do. And the restriction process is quite lengthy. I think it takes around a year, even more. And stakeholders are consulted during the process 2 times. There's one longer consultation that lasts for 6 months, and then one shorter consultation. And all the proposals are evaluated by 2 scientific committees. There's one committee that looks at the risks of the chemical or the material, and then the other one looks at the impacts on society. So it's a socio-economic analysis committee. And we as the agency, we don't decide on restrictions. Those are done by the Commission and EU member states. In Brussels, I think nowadays online. Then this has also been discussed quite a lot already. What are microplastics? They're very small solid plastic particles. The secondary microplastics are a result of degradation, wear and tear. And the primary microplastics are deliberately manufactured and added to products like cosmetics, fertilizers, or this soft infill that you see on synthetic sport pitches. And the primary microplastics are what our proposal is trying to tackle. And why do we do this? Why is the EU doing this? The concern is environmental pollution. We estimate that each year around 42,000 tons of microplastics are released into the European environment from these intentional uses. There's a lot more if you count the secondary microplastics as well. The biggest source is the granular infill on the sport pitches, which can be up to 16,000 tons a year. So it's quite a big release. I think second is cosmetics, and I think fertilizers. They're the next biggest releases of microplastics. And as mentioned here already, the problem is that they're very persistent. They're very universal pollutants. Once they are in the environment, they stay there, and they pollute our water, seas, and also our soils, food, and drinking water. And even if you think that the 42,000 tons might not sound that big of a deal, it is big when you think about the growing environmental stock. So it grows every year with 42,000 tons, so it is significant. And as mentioned, the environmental concern of the pollution is the justification for our restriction proposal. We didn't have a look at the impacts on human health. So what did we propose? Basically, we said that we would like to have a ban on products that include microplastics when the microplastics are released from the product when they are used. We use inevitably released in the proposal. So this is what we would like to see banned altogether. Then there are derogations, so derogated uses, for example, for natural polymers, or uses where there's no release, microplastic release. For example, I heard that paint is one of these types of uses where you have microplastics in the paint, but once you put it on the wall, the microplastics kind of integrate into the paint and they form a film. So we consider that this does not lead to microplastic release. And then there are derogations also for uses that are already regulated, for example, like food additives and medicines. But when there is a derogated use, we also require companies to give safe use information. So this is to minimize the use, the release of microplastics, and then we require also companies to report microplastic releases to ECHA, so we can monitor those and they can potentially be regulated in the future. Our proposal includes transitional periods to give companies time to develop alternatives, and it has two options to tackle the granule infill concern. One of them is a ban, I think after 6 years transition, and the other one is the mandatory use of risk management measure like Sensis and these granule catchers, which prevent the granules from going into the wastewater from the fields. Then the impact of our proposal, we estimate that it would prevent 500,000 tons of releases over 20 years. And the annual emissions could be released by more than 90% after the transition periods have expired. The cost to industry are estimated at 11 or 19 billion, and the wide range depends on what is decided to be included for the granule infill. So what's the risk management option to limit the pollution from the sport pitches?
We need to wrap up. You have
yes,
the one. What's
yes.
next?
This is the last topic-related slide. So our committees finalized their work in December last year, and we are now exactly working hard on to get the administrative parts ready, and we are ready to soon to send our proposal and the committee's evaluation to the Commission. And the Commission then has 3 months' time to put forward a proposal to the member states, and then the Commission and the member states discuss in the REACH committee. And once they agree, the proposal is then scrutinized by the Council and the Parliament, and finally adopted by the European Commission. This could happen in 2022. So that's it. I still have a few links if you want to have a look. We have a so-called hot topics page on microplastics, and there's also this kind of documentary style video, which you might be interested in.
If you could share that in the chat with all participants, that would be amazing. There's also a question posted to you on the chat. We will take up questions at the end of the session. Now I would like to ask David León from the organization Hombre y Territorio to take the floor. I'm not going to introduce him because we're running out of time, but please go ahead.
Okay, no problem. Thank you very much. I'm going to share the windows. Okay. Can you see it?
Yes.
Yes, no? Okay. So I'm David León. I'm coming from an NGO of Spain, and we are really happy. We are invited to this forum or this workshop because the NGOs, okay, we don't have a relevant, but maybe an important role in all this problem because we can act as a hinge between different sectors of society, including managers, including companies, including academics and population, of course. And I think this project or this issue is of importance because we have the opportunity of change behavior, change the attitude and access to information of different sectors. Huh? So this project is included in a huge project of Libera. It's an organization that is currently acting in Spain to reduce littering and has 3 different axes, one of participation, another one of prevention, and the last of knowledge. And this project of microplastics protocol, we tried to cover these three axes. No, the first objective we pointed was to create an adaptive tool, sampling methodology, but to be suitable for different stakeholders, including technicians, researchers, associations, volunteers, and teachers and academics. And the second objective, complementing the first one, was to sample at least 100 rivers along Spain, and to make the first approximation of these projects in Spain and applying the methodology. And in all the actions we have tried, and we are currently trying to involve population and involve different sectors. Meanwhile, we are developing the activities. Huh? So we started in 2019. We did an important article and information search, and we did different interviews and collaborations. We have done different tests for the methodology in rivers and stream, also in the laboratory, both for the identification of the different elements of microplastics and for the polymer identification. In the sampling campaign, there was a sampling organized by SEO BirdLife organization in Spain, and within the Spanish National Research Council. They were to sample different contaminants in important bird areas for the biodiversity, the IVAs, and we taught them to collect microplastics with our methodology. Okay, the protocol or the document is actually in Spanish, but we are working with the University of Cork in Ireland with a colleague that is working there for the translation. So I hope in a few weeks that will be translated in English. And if you agree, I can share you through the Plastic Justice. You can see there are a lot of icons. You have a lot of graphics to understand the problem, to understand which are the main points, which are the main problems, why the secondary plastics, microplastics, and primary microplastic can be a problem for the different species and different ecosystems. And we have seen in the last speeches, and we have structured the protocol, the document, in different steps of a high complexity, and to be adaptable for the different sectors that can be used. It's important to say that the projects and the information we give also in the protocol and in the sampling campaign is focused on those microplastics that have positive or zero buoyancy. That this is a very important characteristics of plastics, of polymers, because not all of them are floating. No, some of them are the sediment, and this methodology is adapted for those that are floating or in the surface. Okay, so in the protocol, in the methodology, we show how and what materials do you need for sampling in rivers. We give some drafts of field sheets to be adapted for the different projects. And also we show which are the minimal or the requirements you need in a laboratory. For example, if you are a teacher, or maybe if you are working in a natural area and you want to incorporate this study in your activity of monitoring. Okay, we also give some drafts for the laboratory sheet to show the information you are obtaining of the different samples, and we give a identification guide to make more easier people who want to make an activity to detect which can be and which cannot be microplastics when you are looking them for the first time with a binocular glass, you know. So there are useful information for this. Okay. So, for the last information we give we gave in the project, we have done the third analysis of the microplastic. That will be to peel the onion, you know, and we have decanted for the spectroscopy with infrared radiation, and as you maybe know, it's a very specific technology to detect which are the polymers you are finding on your samples, and you can get the information of what are you finding in your river or in your stream. Okay, I give you some examples because we have made a third analysis with electronic microscopy, and it gives you another point of view of this problem because of some of the issues that, for example, Martin Thiel and Hydra and Raymond has told before, for the potential of these elements of transport different contaminants, different invasive species, and because of the chemical materials that they have in the composition that can be of human, can be important for human health. Now you have here a fragment. Okay, when you see in the electronic microscopy, you can see how complex are these fibers or these elements. No, the third one and the last is a sphere. You can see how well, particular are these elements. Okay, I'm finishing. The sampling results for the EVA sampling, we have 150 samples of different rivers in Spain with 76% of presence of microplastic. I have to remember that all of these samples are recorded in protected areas of Spain. Fibers and fragments are the mainly occurrence in number of samples and in number of items for sample. And we have detected about 29 different polymers in the waters of the samples of Spain we have sampling. The awareness on the scope data, we are still working on it, but we have a high scope in television and press. We have made a lot of workshops. We have made, yeah, thank you. worked with some scholars, and we have just published an article in a journal. Just finished it. Thank you for your attention, and excuse me for the English and the speed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. I'm sorry to cut you short, but we have to move on. So I would like to call Irene Diaz from Fundación EcoAlf to the panel, or to present.
Okay. Yeah. Hi, good afternoon. Hi, everybody. Thank you for the invitation. And well, I'm Irene Diaz. I'm the general manager of the EcoAlf Foundation. And the EcoAlf Foundation was created from EcoAlf, which is a fashion brand company. It was created, in fact, to launch a project called Upcycling the Oceans. That's the one I'm talking about now. And it's a project which indeed doesn't address directly the microplastics issue, but I think it does in an indirect way, because it tries to clean up the ocean, to give a second life to the plastic recover, and above all to raise awareness about the marine pollution. So I'm trying to share now the screen. Okay, let me know if it works. Yeah.
Yeah, it works.
Okay, perfect. So okay, so that's the presentation that I talked. The project was born from the realization when we realized that. Let me check if it moves. Okay, about the marine litter issue, about the amount of trash that fishermen from the Mediterranean, that it was where it began, were collecting accidentally. The first image you can see top left is something that fishermen collect every day in the Mediterranean area. It also was a mix of things, because it was also from the reality that the fashion is the second most polluting industry in the world. And it was also about the third reality, that this was that, okay, it can be considered waste from a point of view, but it could be considered a raw material from another point of view. So we wanted to launch a project able to provide, to prove that it's possible to do things with that marine litter, that it should have never been on the seabed, okay, and that there is a lot of things to do upstream. That sometimes we can think that most of the marine litter comes from the maritime activities, but the reality is more than 80% comes from inland, no? So that's how we created Upcycling the Oceans, and these are the phases of the project. So what we do mainly is to work hand in hand with fishermen. Fishermen, mainly trawlers, that collect what fish trash accidentally, okay? So they sort the fish they have collected and the plastics and other kinds of trash that they collect. So we ask them to put it in the small bins they have at in the boat. And then when they arrive at the harbor, they put that trash into a bigger containers that are for this purpose at the harbor. Then we hire a transportation company and a sorting plant, okay, to keep traceability of the litter collected. And then we do the sorting to give it a second life when it's possible. It's not always is possible to do a second life to this marine litter currently, but we try to do our most to recycle. Some of the examples that we do is a collaboration with the textile industry, but not only. Currently, we are trying to close more and more the loop, and we are testing, and we are partnered with another entities willing to give a second life to the trash collected, not linked to the textile sector, although the textile was the first pilot in this project. So what we want to do, okay, of course we want to clean up the ocean as far as possible, but to be honest, we are currently, I don't know, collecting about 180 tons of trash per year, which is a big amount, of course, but it doesn't. It's just a drop in the ocean, no? If you compare with the amount of trash that arrive to the ocean every year. But we want to work more and more in prevention. We realize that these kind of projects are not a solution at all, but they can be a good idea. They can be a good awareness tool. They can be a good tool for data collection. These data collections help us to take measures upstream to avoid the problems. And they are also a good example of what can be done with this trash that shouldn't have been in the ocean, no? So we think that if we promote circular economy, if we show that we can do beautiful things with this material, that it can be with the same quality as the virgin materials, at the end we are preventing littering. So what we have done in Spain during the last 5 years is to collaborate with more than 40 ports with 2,600 fishermen that are working for free. They are volunteers, and they are participating in this project because they want to clean their sea. And we have the opportunity to replicate the project in Thailand during the last 3 years. And currently we are trying to expand the projects into another Mediterranean countries. Currently we are collaborating in Greece with Enaleia. It's a local entity that works with fishermen. So we are collaborating in 13 Greek ports. And last October we launched our first port in Italy. And nowadays we are working in France to replicate not only in the Mediterranean area, but also in the Channel, where most of the trawling fleet works. No? So here you've got some main results. Currently we have 47 ports involved, more than 600 boats, over 2,600 fishermen. But here you have also the numbers about the trash collected so far and the PET recovered and other plastic recovered. But I think it's important to also what we try to do to raise awareness, and it means talks at the schools, workshops at the schools, and that's last step, which is it has been included in the last year, and it has been we have used Mar Nova methodology to work with fishermen and to have good data that can be reported to the government, to the authorities, and it can be reported to Europe. And we hope this will be useful to understand better what is happening in the sea and what can be done. Okay, that's an example of one of the products that can be done with the litter recover, and how we try to work on circular economy, not only from the material point of view that is recycled, but also about the lifespan of the product, about the way we talk about that, how we explain the recommendations about how to extend the lifespan of the project, and the eco design from the beginning, no? From the creation of the product. So what we try to do is to look for partners. So when we look for the expansion, or we try to expand the project into another countries or into another regions, we need partners, of course, no? So what kind of partners we look for? Firstly, the fishing sector is the main character of this initiative. But we also look for another similar initiatives, because about 6 years ago when we began, there were not so many, but fortunately now there are more and more. So we try to find these partners that are already doing something, maybe related to fishing nets, or maybe related to beach cleanups or other things, but that are important, no? to work together. We also try to work with NGOs because of the role they can play with the citizens and with the awareness, and sometimes also with the scientific knowledge, as David told. we look for collaborators. We mean collaborators, entities willing to recycle the marine litter recovered. Okay, we have some of them, but sometimes we miss more entities that's willing to use in their manufacture this kind of material. And of course, the waste managers, because this trash has to be treated with care. No, it's not easy. It's not a valuable material. Nobody likes it. So we look for waste managers willing to take our baby. No, and of course the authorities. Yeah, okay, the authorities and of course the supporters. So that's all. That's all. Yes,
thank you. Thank you so much, Irene. I would like to say you have several questions in the chat already. One of them is from our next presenter. So I'm just going to segue into Philip Earhorn's presentation. And after Philip's presentation, then we'll have a round of questions and answers with all of you here.
Okay.
Hello, Philip.
Hi, thank you very much. Yeah, I'm jumping ahead. Yes, I won't waste any time. My name is Philip Earhorn. I'm one of the co-founders and the CTO of the Great Bubble Barrier. And I think I unfortunately couldn't join the whole seminar so far. But what we're talking about, I think everyone is aware that the plastic problem in our oceans is huge, and not only in our oceans. For us, the main important part is if you look at the plastic that's in our oceans, around 2/3, or we estimate that around 2/3 are traveling there through rivers and canals. So for us, the approach was, if the problem is already in the water, if we already can't prevent it's in the water, shouldn't we better catching it in rivers closer to the source before it actually gets a chance to end up in the ocean? So we came up with a drastic solution, basically, which doesn't hinder the passing of ships or wildlife, as well as has an effect over the whole width and depth of the river. So how do we do that? Basically, we use air, nothing but air. We place a perforated tube diagonally on the bottom of the river or the canal, and we pump air through it. And what that does is it creates an uplift stream, which can take up suspended plastic to the surface. And then together with the natural flow of the river, the trash will be guided to the side and then into an allocated catchment system, which will retain the waste until it's removed from the water. What this looks like in real life is then like this. This is our first permanent system in Amsterdam, the Netherlands.
I'm sorry, Philip, you're not sharing your screen.
Oh, maybe it's because is it showing now?
No.
Was I not sharing at all?
No,
oh.
Not yet.
Oh, I'm sorry.
now you are. There we go.
I'm so sorry. Okay, so I wasn't sharing the whole time. Okay, quick, you know the story. It's a bubble curtain. We use air bubbles to direct plastic to the surface, and then at the surface, together with the natural flow of the river, towards the side into the catchment system. Much more simpler. If you look at this image, this is an actual drone image of the system in Amsterdam. You would see basically the water come from the bottom of your screen, and it flows towards the big canal here, which ultimately ends up in the North Sea, a couple of 100 meters downstream. We place them where? We specifically place these, or we prefer to place them in densely populated areas where we expect the majority of the plastic waste to enter the waterways. This way we can have smaller systems with a much higher concentration of plastics. And also you see it here as well with the bridge. We have good visibility. We have every day people stopping and reading the information signs, and we can create awareness and tackle the problem close to the source. And this is something that's really important for us. Bubble barriers, we don't see them just as a technical solution to capture plastics and then everything is fine. We see them as monitoring tools for the first time it's possible to see what trash travels through our rivers and would otherwise just go by unseen and would be anonymously in the ocean. We're working together with local NGOs to have a look at the plastic that and collect data, what kind of trash and what the sources are. We're going to make these information is open source, so we hope to also promote additional measures and new policies, because if you want to tackle the problem further upstream, you need to have proof for the effects of your measures, and we believe we can help with our bubble barrier. A little bit more towards microplastics and where the microplastics come in. For us, the main target is, of course, the bigger pieces, and we want to catch plastic before it actually gets the chance to break down into smaller pieces further down in its pollution career, basically. But we also see that we're not only catching basically microplastic before it becomes microplastic, but also actual microplastic. And if I talk about that, I'm talking about the literature microplastic amount, so 5 millimeter to 1 millimeter. Everything is smaller. We don't know yet, and we're not going to claim anything about the non-visible microplastics, basically. So this is a nice collection from last year after New Year's. You can see that with all the wooden rocket, not sure what you call it. But if you look closer, you will see that you have a lot of smaller microplastics pieces, sometimes sticking to the larger pieces, but also just under the surface that we wouldn't see. So in Amsterdam right now, we're working together with the Plastic Soup Foundation, where we're sorting out amounts of that trash to really have concrete data on what do we actually have in there. Unfortunately, this was put on hold because of the ongoing pandemic, but we're hoping to pick it up again later this year so that we can continue, not only stopping the plastic, but provide data for researchers, scientists, policymakers, and to engage new measures. So what we do as well, we do a little a media campaign around the Catch of the Month series, where we highlight certain plastic topics that the system is catching in Amsterdam, and to go a little bit into where it's coming from and what we could maybe do about it. So if you're keen to follow us on social media, you can have a look at that. I'll keep it very short. Little image from not too long ago. Microplastics, definitely stuff that nightmares are made of. You sometimes won't believe what kind of things we're catching there. Last week, we also had an old TV in the catchment system. It's sometimes quite shocking to see what would otherwise just flow off and would be gone. But hopefully, with our systems, we can make this was not supposed to be a video, a little dent into this problem. And then I'm already at the end. If you want to have a look at our one-pager, you can scan this QR code or visit our bubble barrier digitally on Google Street View. I think I can also quickly share a link directly in the chat for people to have a look. Thank you very much.
That would be great. Thank you, Philip. David, Irene, and Philip, and Hannah Kaisa, please. We're having a short round of questions. I saw that Hannah had already answered a question in the chat very proactively. So that's good. And I have a little bit of an open question posted here by Talita, saying that can the pandemic, like COVID-19, be related to the ecological imbalance caused by microplastics in the environment? It's a bit of an open-ended question. I don't know if anybody feels that there is a direct relation.
If I can pick it up, I don't know. From my feeling about plastic pollution, I think there's a lot of problems we can probably connect to it in the future. I would not really go into the pandemic. I think it's still very early to say what are the exact causes and reasons. Of course, one is globalization and what humans do generally on Earth. I would say connecting to pandemic would be a bit far-fetched. I think the first estimations are going more in the animal trade.
Perfect. There's one question directed to you, Philip, from Martin Thiel, the other presenter before. What do you do with the natural debris captured together with the plastic debris in your system?
It's generally, and we have to be brutally honest about this, we have no control always where the plastic goes and the trash goes. So we supply the system to a client basically at the end of the day, which are governmental institutions, and they usually have their waste processing in place. We can unfortunately not take care of the whole processing, and at the moment recycling of that material that's in there is absolutely I'm not sure who currently would put money into this, because there's no return of investment on this. It costs you money and no one wants to spend money on that. And also, what can you do afterwards with that without making, creating new materials that can be polluted? There is natural debris as well that we collect. And in natural river systems, this debris sometimes is very valuable and needs to stay in the river. The locations where we are now at are usually as polluted, or let's say have such a high organic load that's rather small, the impact. If we're talking about more of a natural river system, that's something we'll have to assess in the future. If you are more in a natural environment, absolutely. Also, if we have larger pieces, I don't know if a whole tree branch, like a large tree branch of multiple hundreds of kilos, I don't think we would capture that. So that would definitely stay in the river.
Thank you very much. There's another question to Irene from EcoAlf. How do you close the loop on your garments that are mixing fibers, like polyamide with elastane, that you promote on the website?
Yeah, currently EcoAlf is trying to do things better and better, but it's not perfect at all. And there are things, when the company began 10 years ago, the goal was doing garments from recycled materials, and that was. And now more and more the company is trying to work on the eco-conception from the cradle. So what currently are trying is to reduce the blending of materials to promote the post-consumer recycling, of course. It's currently working in some research and development projects to try to, I don't know how to say, but to divide the materials after the consumption, but we are aware that is better, much better if from the beginning it's not blended. About fall, EcoAlf is trying to focus on preventing the waste, not only focusing in recycling the garment at the end of the lifespan. It's more like, okay, try to buy less, try to buy better, try to buy high quality products, to reduce this crazy consumption. And to focus on that, and above all also to participate in different thinking tanks, in different projects and initiatives related to the issue. But there is much more to do, of course.
Yeah, it always feels like there's so much to do. There is one more question, or there's two questions. One from Luis saying to Philippe, if do the bubbles not disturb marine life? And it's associated to a question from Martin Thiel, wondering how do small larvae, fish or shrimps react to the bubble barrier, if you've looked into that.
Yeah, I don't know, it's just a wording, but marine wildlife, of course, shouldn't be in the locations where we're at. So we're talking about aquatic wildlife, but not the less, of course, important. We are doing also in Amsterdam an environmental assessment, also the impact on fish we're having a look at. With the impact of the bubbles, we have one big side effect, which is we're putting in oxygen. So it's ambient air that we put into the water, and we can locally increase the amount of oxygen that's saturated in the waterways. We know that a lot of the locations we're looking at, they have a problem with low oxygen levels and eutrophication even sometimes. Nonetheless, every location will be different. Every location will have its own unique ecosystem, and that's something we're going to have to monitor with every project and be aware of. It's definitely high on the list. So far, we know that air bubbles have been trying to use it to deter fish for a long time, and they're failing. So that's good for us. But unfortunately, most studies are looking at how can we deter them. So they're not really reporting on how not to deter them. They're doing projects with like 6 rows of bubble curtains in a row with much larger air volumes, and they're still not succeeding. And we have one single line of very fine air bubbles that we're quite confident that the impact will be minimal. But as I said, we're going to keep assessing it.
I see most of the questions are directed to Philip. There is another one. Are you able to catch the entire plastic litter from the canals?
No, we're not. We have seen in previous tests that we can catch around 86% of our test material under varying weather conditions, basically. As I said, we bring up plastic from suspension onto the surface, but there's also plastic that is already sunken and it's more like tumbling over the bottom. About that, we don't know too much yet. And in general, the sampling of how much you're catching versus how much is still going through is very tricky, because for that we would have to, behind the bubble barrier, have a very fine mesh that takes out everything basically. But the good thing about the bubble curtain is that it doesn't deter fish and also obstruct ship traffic. And to actually test it very thoroughly, we would have to obstruct the ship traffic. So it's a bit of a tricky part. And again, coming back to monitoring, we're now looking at microplastic monitoring, but in general, we're still missing good monitoring methods to actually see how much trash we have. And as I said, that's another approach we're hoping to do here, that with the bubble barrier, it's actually the first time we can do long-term monitoring about the discharge of plastics that are going through our rivers, because I think a lot of the plastic is just going by unseen.
I think and the stuff that David, for example, or Martin before presented, where citizen involvement in measuring are very, very useful in this case. I'm going to ask Philip to look into the chat and respond physically in the chat or typing. And I wanted to raise a question to Hannah Kaisa, sorry, from ECHA. I know it might not be ECHA's exact range of activity, but since you have been proposing regulations or directives for the European Commission, do you see these sort of initiatives like the upcycling the oceans or the bubble barriers something that could also go in that line of enforcement, or kind of like suggested as a good practice at the EU level?
Yes, I think definitely we are very interested in all technologies and ideas that people have or companies have, and those we hope to hear from during the consultation. So we have a 6-month consultation after we kind of submit the proposal, where we normally get these kind of we get information on what's available in the market, because of course we don't know what's out there, all the different kinds of ideas. So yes, definitely these would be interesting, or would have been interesting in the consultation period. I remember, for example, that we got for the rubber granules, for example, we got information about these granule catchers during the consultation that I believe at least one of the Finnish companies has developed to put into the sewage entry of the sewage to catch the granules before they go into the water.
Okay, great, thank you very much. Now I'm not sure I've covered all the questions, to be honest, but thank you very much for the presentation. We have some minutes now as a break. I know I need it, so I'll catch up here again at 5. Thank you very much for your presentations and sharing the links. Everything that can be shared here will be made available on the project webpage anyway. So we'll hope to get your input there.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you. We start again at 5 for the next block of microplastics counterculture.
Okay, Jean-Francois, are we ready for you?
Fine.
Hello.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Would you like to share a screen? Is that how you want to present?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. We have, now it's time. I was going to say we have 1 minute, but it is exactly 5 o'clock.
All
so
right.
we're going to start. I'm going to take over the hosting job a little bit because Isabel got to have a little break, a little rest here. So Jean-Francois, shall I introduce you, or would you like to do that yourself?
Please do it. Do it yourself. It will be a better English than mine.
Would you like me to do my best French?
Yeah, please.
No. That's just criminal. I don't think we should do that. Okay. Jean-Francois Fileux is a director of international development and export at ProPlast. His background is in food science engineering with a master's in computer applications. He is passionate about climate change and will speak to us today about ProPlast and recycling in Senegal. I hope I have got that right.
That's perfect.
Okay, great. So we have 10 minutes and we're going to time you. Please go ahead.
Do you see my screen?
Yes, we do.
That's perfect. Okay, let's go. So I'm really happy to be here with you tonight. Actually, I'm speaking from France, but I'm working both in France and Senegal, and I will talk about an adventure we've been with for 12 years. I will invite you in Senegal to the second city of Senegal, which is, oh, you see my, okay, it's better like that. Okay. I invite you to Thiès, which is the second city of Senegal, for 400,000 inhabitants near Dakar, the capital. And this is, when you just arrive to Thiès, you see this kind of picture. And you just have to keep in mind that Sub-Saharan Africa is one of the fastest growing regions in the world, and waste is expected to nearly triple by 2050. And then there is no collection or fast no collection and no recovery infrastructure. So this is a real environmental danger. This is a national priority. The president of Senegal said that a few months ago. And the amount of waste, especially in urban areas, is increasingly growing exponentially. So, well, we are talking today, I know, about microplastic, but it's microplastic, but it's plastic in general. And in general, just keep in mind that, well, in Europe, we recycle around 30% of plastic. Just have this average data in mind. In Senegal, and most of the time in Africa, we recycle less than 5%. It means that the remaining 95% are burnt, eaten by animals, or just found in the rivers and then in the ocean. So if you want to, I will add a link in the chat, and you can see a video that was broadcasted in the French TV a few months ago. Well, this is the context. This is the situation. What about ProPlast? So ProPlast has been created 22 years ago. So it was in 1998 by some Senegalese women farmers that decided to clean up the fields from plastic because it was difficult to work in the field. So they were helped with an NGO. And a few years after, the little association became quite a kind of micro industry, and NGO was looking for a private partner. And I was leading a social cooperative. So we created, in relationship with the Italian NGO, ProPlast, which has been created as a social business 10 years ago. And so now we have about 200 employees working in the field of plastic recycling in our plant, 2,000 waste pickers collecting plastic all around the country. And we collect about 2,000 tons of plastic every year. Well, in this period of COVID, it's quite tricky, but it's the average amount of amount of plastic. So we collect about, we are the leader in Senegal, and we collect about 2% of the global plastic. So the objective is to collect at the source. I remember I've been hearing at all the presentation for the beginning of this really interesting webinar, and what I would stress on is that once it is in the ocean, it is too late. So we really try to collect it from source with any kind of means. We have a lot of business model with you can see tricycles, or we have also trucks and so on. But the idea is really to act, and to act urgently, because it is really an environmental danger, all that. We also obviously do beach cleaning, and then we have some partnerships with some local industry, and we try to focus on sustainable design and try to use this plastic waste to long life product that will not be single-use plastic that will come back directly into the ocean. Okay, so we have been working for 4 years on a concept that is called Waste and Hope, that is inspired by fair trade. It's like coffee or chocolate. We believe that the plastic that is collected by Proplast has a lot of social impact, environmental impact, and there is a big storytelling about that. So we have been working with students in the UK, in France, in Spain, to assess the social impact and also the environmental impacts. And now the idea is to create value with this storytelling, and thanks to art and design, being able to develop other kind of Proplast stories all around the world, because there is so much to do in all these developing countries. So we already have some projects in South America, in other parts of Africa, well, it's tricky because of the COVID, but it is our idea to develop and create partnerships. So, for example, we now work with Elisava in Barcelona and Precious Plastic to a project related to school benches for students in Senegal. Well, I tried to be very quick, so I think I got 1 minute. So I am finished.
That's true. You have 1 minute though. So
no, that's okay for me. So we'll finish 1 minute before, so it's nice.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jean-Francois. Then we can leave some extra time for questions, of course, or 1 extra minute. Thank you very much. Okay, let's go to our next speaker, who is Jean-Francois. I think you have to, or maybe I can do it. Stop
I will stop that.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, we will go to Mattia next. Are you there?
Hello, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we hear you really well. So this is Mattia Bernini. And yes, should I introduce you quickly? I just have a couple of lines here. From
yes, if you want,
yeah, okay. So you are the head of web design and strategy at Precious Plastic. Precious Plastic is the go-to place online to learn how to transform plastic waste into valuable products. Sounds fantastic. Please tell us more, Mattia.
I will do. No doubts. I'm gonna try and share the screen. You guys let me know if it works.
Yes, I see your screen.
Fantastic. Do you see full screen now? Yes.
Yes.
All right. So good afternoon, everyone. I hope you guys are not too tired after the whole day of talking. I'm going to try and stick within the 10 minutes. So let's see. So yeah, as you properly said, my name is Mattia, and I lead sort of the precious plastic team in a number of different areas, including web, design, and strategy, of course. So let me start from, the one and only reason why precious plastic exists, which is, of course, the huge, immense, gigantic, global, universal problem of plastic pollution. And today there's been plenty of people discussing the topic, so I'm not going to dive into it too much because I don't want to bore people out again with the same things. I just want to keep in mind the fact that on a global scale, to date, only 9% of all plastic ever being produced is recycled, which is really tiny if you think about the huge sheer quantities of plastic that are produced every year. So yeah, just keep that number in mind, and really that's really what we're working towards with precious plastic, try and increase that percentage, to try and recycle as much plastic as possible so it doesn't end up in the environment. But when we began working on precious plastic about almost 10 years ago in 2013, we really started to ask the question, why? Why is it that plastic doesn't get recycled? And the answer that we got to is that the knowledge and the tools needed to recycle plastic are very inaccessible, and they tend to be also very expensive. So if you wanted to start recycling plastic nowadays, you might need, quite a few millions of euros just to get started. And of course that, not many people are able to do that. So we thought of changing things and really creating a network of people that can work together and collaborate to tackle plastic pollution. So it's not anymore just a few people that are able to do that, but democratizing the technology so that, bigger and bigger critical masses can join in. So we began by designing a set of small machines that can get people started into plastic recycling, to really, experiment, learn how it works. And these machines are, as you can see, small scale. They're very cheap to build. They tend to be also quite easy to be replicated. And they are made with parts that are available globally. So it's not any fancy technology or anything. It's just very easy, low-tech approach that we had with these machines. Then fast forward 5 years, in 2020, we released what we call semi-industrial machines. And these are machines that are a little bit bigger. They require a bit more of an investment to be made. And they are a little bit more difficult technically to build. However, once you build these machines, you are able to create a business out of recycling plastic. So, you're able to do this in a financially sustainable way so that you can do it more and recycle more plastic. And with this machine, you can do all sorts of things. You can create, beautiful chairs, benches, stools. You can play with patterns. You can play with colors, shapes. You can make very precise objects. You can make lamps. You can make construction materials. So you can build beams or bricks. So you can make some little sheds or, art installations. Or again, you can build more in modular structures so that you can increase the size of your creations. Or again, like in this case, this table that we've done for Jaden Smith is a 9-meter long conference table that really shows you how plastic, can be understood as a valuable material because it kind of looks like marble. And it's a really stunning experience to see this table. And that really epitomizes what precious plastic stands for. Precious plastic really tries to change the way that people look at plastic, from something that is cheap and disposable to something that is valuable and precious and that we need to take care of. So this is more like the analog side of the project, the more real life machine building and creating products. But then we also have, of course, all the digital aspect that really enables people to learn, share, and connect with each other. And starting with our website, preciousplastic.com, which is where people get there, they get inspired, they understand what precious plastic is all about, what we do, what we stand for, our goal, our mission, and they really just, browse around and see what the project is about. Once they want to start, we have a whole academy for people where we take people in their plastic recycling journey from 0 to hero. So here you really learn from the basics of plastic, how plastic works, melting temperatures, all the way to building the machines, find people that can build the machines for you, creating beautiful products, but also like more soft skills, like creating a business plan, pitching your idea to a bank so you can get some money to start your recycling business, finding a market for your products, and so on and so forth. So really trying to take people by their hands and really lead them in their plastic recycling journey so that more and more people can join in and try to rise that 9% figure of recycling plastic, of plastic recycled. Then we have our map, which is the place where it's a very crucial tool where people sort of, well, they use a map. So they kind of find each other, they meet each other, and both on a global scale and on a local scale, which is, really where it matters, people, your neighbors, people in your city, people near you that you can work with, you can collaborate with, you can help each other. Then we have the events page. Well, not very successful in 2020, let's say, but this is a very useful page where people can post their events and find a like-minded audience that is interested in plastic recycling. Another really, really important tool that we released in 2020 is the how-tos, and these are basically step-by-step guides that anyone out there that is recycling plastic can upload. So as we know, the plastic pollution problem is a global crisis that we are all facing that we believe needs to be tackled from many different angles, from many different creative approaches. And so it cannot come exclusively from us. The solution cannot come only from us. They need to come from many different angles. And this is what the how-to allows to do, allows people everywhere around the world to tell the world how they are recycling plastic, how they are improving the machines, how they're making a certain product, how they are collecting plastic, and so on and so forth, so that the community can learn from us, of course, but also from everyone else that is working on this. And last but definitely not least is our marketplace, the bazaar. And here is where people buy and sell precious plastic machines, parts, molds, products, raw materials. And this, of course, really helps to create local economies that we hope can boost plastic recycling and also really funnel cash to people that are recycling plastic all around the world. And this is a very important tool, and we really hope it's going to grow in the next years. So really to close the cycle, someone gets on precious plastic, they learn how the recycling world works, they start to connect with this global community that we have by now. They start to build their projects, build their machines, they create products and learn along the way. And then hopefully in the end, they also share back everything that they learn with the community so that we can all together as a project advance and improve our solutions so that we can increase the 9% of plastic that is recycled. Now, starting to work on precious plastic can be a bit daunting because it's a lot of knowledge out there, a lot of video tutorials, a lot of documentation. It can be a bit scary to start. And that's why we created the starter kits, which are step-by-step guide that really take you from 0 to hero, so from like finding the right space to how to bring together a group of people that wants to work on this, to building a machine, finding someone that can build a machine for you, creating a business model, finding the funds, finding a market for your products, and so on and so forth. Really try to make it as simple as possible for people to start recycling plastic. And so all of these solutions, the machines, the products, the digital platforms, the starter kits, they create what we call the precious plastic universe. And an important aspect of this universe is that it's fully open source and fully free. So we want to remove as many barriers as possible to start recycling plastic. And that's why we keep it open and we keep it free. And of course, through the year, a big community of recyclers have grown around the world. We have tens of thousands of people recycling and hundreds of thousands of people online collaborating. And this army comes from all around the world, every country in the planet, and they are, on a daily basis creating better machines, improving the machines, making stunning products, and really bringing about the global change that we want to see in the future. So I think I'm right on time at 10 minutes right now. I hope you guys got a bit of an idea of what we do. If you do have questions, just bring them up at the end of this panel. And thank you very much for listening. I know you must be quite tired.
Thank you very much, Mattia. Yes, indeed. Please stick around because we are going to have a little session in a bit where we're going to ask you some questions too. I think some nice similarities coming forward between you and our first speaker on the panel. So yeah, looking forward to chat a bit about that later. Indeed, you are right on time. And next we go on to Anthony Burrell. Are you there, Anthony?
Yes, I am. Hello.
Hi. I don't see you yet, but maybe Mattia needs to unscreen share. Would you like to share your presentation with us, Anthony?
Yes. Yeah, I've just got a power keynote to share.
Okay, awesome. Okay, while you do that, I'll just say a little something about you, if you don't mind. I don't know where you're based, actually. Where are you now?
I'm in a very small village called Wittersham in Kent, which is in the southeast of England. I'm about 10 minutes from the beach and about an hour and a half from London.
And is it snowing there today?
It is, yeah, it's beautiful.
And very cold.
Yeah, I'm all wrapped up.
Exactly, I feel you. Okay, so you have also designed our poster for the Plastic Justice Actions Day today. That's so awesome. Thank you so much for doing that.
Yeah, pleasure. It was with Raoul, who's also on the call, I think. So yeah, it was great. But I kind of I just love designing posters. Yeah,
no, great, thank you. Well, what I wanted to say is that you've also done a couple of collaborations as a graphic artist with, is it Extinction Rebellion that you've worked with, I understand?
Yeah, I've worked with lots of NGOs. Oxfam and Shelter and Extinction Rebellion. So I've been working with them for the past couple of years. In a kind of just helping them with kind of tone of voice and graphic design. So we launched an offshoot of Exile called Ocean Rebellion, and that's focusing on everything to do with the sea. So we've last year we organised a few actions in London, which was quite good. It was sort of they were quite theatrical interventions, so they're almost like street theatre, really. So I was kind of involved in that. But we've got more things planned for this year, and hopefully, when people can get together, we can actually have some actions and demonstrations back on the street. Because I think Extinction Rebellion, was launched with a huge visual impact, and I think that that's something that we've been missing over the last year, is seeing people come together on the streets to protest.
Well, you seem to have close connections to Raoul, so I'm sure we'll call you back into the project to help us with more things or be involved in everything we're doing as well.
Yeah, definitely.
I don't want to eat too much into your time. If you want to go ahead and share your screen with your slides.
Yeah, how do I do that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I don't believe I've ever done that here. There must be something at the bottom. Yes, there's a green thing that says share screen.
Oh yeah, I got that. Okay, how's that? Ooh. Share screen.
We don't see it yet.
All right, I've got to. I should have done this before, shouldn't I? Do you want to carry on talking?
Anybody? Any jokes in the meantime?
I'm a massive fan of Anthony. I'm so glad to be fan with him.
There was a question to Mattia if the machines were open source. I typed and said that they were open source on the webpage, but you can complement to that information.
I was about to answer. Yeah, I mean, all the material is available online. You have a lot of almost 60 video tutorials, technical drawings, bills of materials, tips and tricks. Really, everything you need to start, it's there. Of course, we're not gonna pay for your motors, but otherwise, everything that all the knowledge that you need to start are there.
Okay, I think I've turned the screen sharing on.
Yes, you're doing a fantastic job. We see a lady on the screen.
Yeah.
Yes.
So she, that lady's a suffragette, and the photograph is from the suffragette protests about 100 years ago. I just love the typography and the kind of costume that's being made out of typography, and to kind of represent this protest. When you see this is from 100 years ago, it's just incredible, the sort of power and just the sheer bravery of these women. So I think the thing about protest graphics in particular is that they change through time, and I think visual communication has to speak about the time that we're in. So these are all historic examples. So this is from the protests in the 60s about racism and rights in the southern states of America. So this is a very famous example of a very simple graphic approach. I am a man, and then when you see it within the protest, within all these people holding the same banner, it creates such a kind of striking and important visual. So I think that's the thing I was mentioning about XR, is that because we can't protest out on the streets at the moment, it's difficult to show that there is a real kind of groundswell of opinion about environmentalism in particular. So by kind of getting out on the streets and kind of protesting in that way, you kind of get your message across. These are some of the posters from the May '68 student protests in Paris. Again, it was a kind of creative-led protest where visual communication was at its heart. And because a lot of these posters were produced by students and printmakers within the art schools in Paris, they had this very striking, recognizable graphic language. This is a photograph of the workshop, the Atelier Populaire, the screen printing workshop that produced a lot of this visual material that was used during the protest. It was kind of like the social media of its time, really. So this is around the same time, late 60s, John and Yoko, War is Over If You Want It. So this was a kind of almost like a Fluxus artwork by Yoko that was kind of co-opted by John to promote his message of kind of world peace through his music. So this campaign was kind of multimedia. It's maybe one of the first multimedia music campaigns in the late 60s. So this very strong statement, war is over if you want it. It still kind of connects with us now, I think. I think a lot of these examples that I'm showing are kind of timeless in a way. They still connect with us in different ways. And this is a one-man protest by a guy called Stanley Green, who used to walk up and down Oxford Street in London with his one-man protest against lust. So I just love, he's such a kind of curious character, this guy. So this was in the 1970s and 80s. So he'd walk up and down Oxford Street campaigning against everything that he thought was wrong. and people would just kind of ignore him or see him as quite a sort of marginal figure, really, almost like a comedy character. But he had this little book that he sold, 8 passion proteins. So in a way, it was kind of like, you know, an early kind of vegan campaigner, you know, kind of talking about something that was incredibly important to him. So I just love that idea of a single one-person protest. So this is Sister Karita Kent. She's a screen printer, and artists are using lots of visual kind of graphic design techniques. And she was also a nun. So this is in the 1960s in America. So she produced lots of very bold kind of posters that kind of referenced pop art, but also referenced her faith, and how those two things kind of connected in her work is incredible, I think. Another very courageous woman. And this is Catherine Hamnett meeting Margaret Thatcher in Downing Street. So Hamnett was wearing this T-shirt protesting against nuclear weapons. And when she met Margaret Thatcher, she undid her jacket to show this message. So it was a very provocative action, especially within Downing Street and meeting the Prime Minister at the time. So it was to get this incredible image that would be shown in newspapers and spread the message of anti-nuclear protest. So this is, I think this is the first piece of kind of protest graphics that I made myself. So this is back in 2010, and this was the Gulf of Mexico oil disaster. So it was a huge news story, and I wanted to kind of make a piece of work about this, and I connected with this guy, Tom Gall, who wanted to kind of print a poster using the oil from the beach. So he went out to Louisiana, gathered oil from the beach and the sand and mixed together. And then we found a screen printer in New Orleans to produce the screen print. So you can see on the screen that the guy's printing with a mixture of sand and oil to produce his print. So this was the resulting print that was made. We made an edition, and that was sold online, and it kind of got a decent amount of attention. So this was kind of back in 2010, kind of as social media was emerging as a tool for communication. So that was the first time I kind of got involved in anything that was kind of connected with protest, really. This is a recent project for Oxfam. So we took t-shirts. T-shirts.
2 more minutes left. Sorry.
Okay, I'll just whiz through this. So t-shirts that were kind of to be reused and recycled. So we screen printed on these t-shirts to produce brand new kind of t-shirt designs. So it's kind of like reusing t-shirts that would normally have been going to landfill. So this was kind of protesting and drawing attention to fast fashion and its kind of terrible effects on ecology. So that was an event that we did in London. So this is work for XR. So this was kind of part of the second rebellion, which was in October 2019. So this is kind of, I like to work a lot with letterpress typography. I think it kind of connects right back to the suffragettes with the use of letterpress and simple messaging and very bold graphics. So these were produced as posters and used during the protest. As you'll see, so this is in Trafalgar Square. So XR occupied Trafalgar Square for a week, and that was a kind of, they kind of created almost like an installation within Trafalgar Square that was home to kind of workshops and talks, and it was like had a kind of carnival atmosphere in the space. So there you go. That's what I've been up to recently.
Great. Thank you so much, Anthony. Such beautiful work. Thank you for sharing that with us. Okay, we're a little bit over time, but we're going to go straight into our panel session with the 3 speakers together. There've been a couple of questions in the chat, and I see some of them have already been answered, but I thought maybe it could be worthwhile to return to some of the questions. So Niels was asking to Jean-Francois, could you elaborate on how far the situation in Africa is still a colonial relic? Okay, I believe that Jean-Francois, you have answered that already in the chat, but I thought maybe it's interesting to, between you and Mattia, possibly you work in different contexts. I think Mattia works more in Europe, if that's correct. Mattia?
No, I wouldn't say so. I mean,
Okay.
we are based in Europe, but
yeah,
people that start working on precious plastic, they're everywhere. And fun enough, we also have worked with Jean-Francois. We just sent a sheet press to them. So now we hopefully gonna make lots of chairs and tables for schools in Senegal. If I'm
actually we don't. Yeah, but we've been working together with other person of your team. But I'm happy to see you. But no, actually, so it answers. It is answering also another question. So everybody can buy machines or can build its own machine from precious plastic. So on our side, we have been working with the precious plastic team to have a new sheet press to perform school lunches for Senegal. So and we have both projects either in Europe and in Africa. So it is in all countries.
Maybe can I also rephrase the question, because I have the feeling that the direction this is going is not the correct. I'm trying to sort of ask Jean-Francois in how far actually the infrastructure and the shipment and also production of plastic is something that originates, of course, in sort of the Western world and has been sort of been almost moved into the global South. And I think it does, I think, require to sort of think about where this problem actually comes from.
So, okay, so I did not understand your question. That's it? Sorry. Okay. Well, if I understand well, I would say that plastic, we already talked about that. Plastic is a wonderful material. So it is used everywhere. But, and for a lot of situation, we do not have other solutions than plastic. But I still don't know if I really understand your question. But what I can say from my experience in Africa for 15 years is that African people are more advanced than European people to deal with plastic recycling, even though they are recycle less, but they do it like low tech. You know, they have issues, and it's complicated to buy some virgin fiber. So they will be more eager to recycle and to have some circular economy to use their plastic. And we have a lot of technology to learn from Africa to be more performant in Europe, dealing with plastic recycling. I still don't know if I understood well your question, but
no, I mean, I guess, I can totally imagine that that's exactly, what I'm trying to point to is that we can actually learn even more. But I'm also trying to sort of say that the idea of the exploitation and the concept of really like, I mean, in the end, plastic is of course like an oil-based product. So I guess the concept of extraction and production. That's a very Western and a very so it was exported into these countries and sort of overlaying the structures and also the local productions and sort of, so it's exported by the industrial world.
Well,
and with it's the problem.
I would say that fossil fuel is exported everywhere in the world. You know, and in Europe, in France at least, we do not have fossil fuel, and we import it. For me, when you talk about perhaps it's a cultural bias, but when I hear about colonial relict, I do think about agriculture, for example. If you go to Senegal, you will see that all the agriculture is peanuts production. So this is because of the history of colonialism, and they lost their primary crops, and this is a real issue. But regarding plastic and regarding fossil fuel in general, it's more like everybody use it because it does not cost so much, and it's very powerful as an energy or as a material. No.
Thank you. Alice, go ahead.
Can I? It's not quite exactly following on, but I think it needs to be addressed. Thanks everyone for your presentations. I'm Alice, and I would like to, what I think connects these presentations we've just seen is an incredible kind of distillation process, a simplifying and a kind of a reductionism. And I'm just saying that in a neutral way. I'm not saying that in a pejorative way, of an incredibly complex issue. So Anthony, if I could pick up with you, I adore your work. So we're starting at that point. But so a message like votes for women is pretty clear, right? I mean, it's a simple message, it's a call to action. Or at least, you know, in terms of an awareness campaign, it's straightforward. But as we've seen this morning with these incredible scientists, or this afternoon, the data is so inconclusive on microplastics, and it's so contested, and it's literally coming in by the minute. So is the best use of art and design to make statements, simple statements, even if they're clear and even if they're compelling, and even if the plastics being recycled are nice to look at? Or should we in fact be drawing attention somehow to the complexity of the situation, and maybe using the design apparatus to gather more data in some way? So I'm going to ask each of you, I guess, to sort of defend your position maybe, or question it somehow. Anthony, would you start?
Yeah, I think I've got on, I think it's on Thursday this week, I've got another Zoom call with XR, and there's probably about 10 people involved in that Zoom call, and it'll probably go on for about an hour and a half to 2 hours, and it will be a lot of people talking about very complicated issues and kind of how we communicate with people about these issues. And it gets very, very difficult to then unpick all that and to produce visual communication that connects with people. So a lot of the time it's my job just to listen to all this information and kind of soak it up, and then think of you know, with a friend of mine, Dave Bell, who's a copywriter, just to think of very simple messages that kind of boil down all this information into something that can be used as, you know, as a poster or as a post on social media, just to connect with people. I think you know, the more you learn about, you know, microplastics and you know, the kind of our impact on the environment, then it kind of does seem hopeless, you know. And it's like, how do we connect with people and make it into something that isn't hopeless, that you know, there are ways to kind of change manufacturing and, you know, our own personal choices. You know, as consumers, we've all got, you know, a huge amount of power in the objects and the materials and things that we buy. So you know, being educated consumers is a way of kind of connecting with people. And so, yeah, I think, you know, I think we all think about how David Attenborough connects with people on an emotional level. And I think as visual communicators, we have to connect emotionally with people about these things, rather than just bombarding people with, you know, with statistics that kind of don't really mean anything. I think, you know, our connection between the way that we live now and the environment, you know, we're quite disconnected to the environment, especially to the sea. You know, the sea is seen as this kind of other place, you know, almost like outer space. So, you know, it's our job to connect people with things that are kind of quite abstract.
Okay, great, good response. Although I certainly wouldn't, I'm not advocating for bombarding of statistics at all, but rather just a kind of entertaining the possibility of a big fat question mark, you know. Yeah. But I appreciate the your point and this idea of hope encapsulated in actually kind of making a statement, and I hear that. But I'd love to hear from the others as well. And another thing I heard very much between you three is, I think you all acknowledge, and someone even used this word, making a small dent. So yeah, I would ask the question, is it better to make a small dent, you know, even if it is small, than nothing at all? And indeed, is the power, in fact, in making lots of small dents and connecting them? So in fact, there's a sort of a network situation that arrives. Anthony's just talked about connecting with people. You guys, Jean-Francois and Mattea, are already connected. But how can we do more of that? How can, do you wrestle with these questions yourself about the small dentedness of your work, Mattea, for example?
Yeah, of course. How could you not when you dedicate, you know, 100% of your life to a cause? Of course, you question, you know, what does it mean? Sometimes it feels like it doesn't mean a lot. You know, you spend years and decades working on a problem when it seems so big, and the forces at play are so gigantic, with billions thrown into this industry, and, you know, big sort of monolithic structures that are playing against you. However, I think innovation happens in these small dents. I think that's where you can hope to find the innovation that will revolutionize an industry and a society. I mean, of course, we do know that it's small, even though we are, you know, sort of a global project with tens of thousands of people that are working on this daily. We know it's a dent, of course, but I think that's where, you know, we hope that we can inspire the next generation of recyclers, or of innovators, of designers, to come up with the idea that will hopefully take us away out of this crisis. And I would say I agree very much with Anthony, because I mean, people are overstimulated with data and scientists telling them, you know, doomsday scenario. I think we need to simplify this concept so that we can gather a critical mass that will act upon the current reality that is creating these problems. And I think in precious plastic, we do that a lot when we simplify a message to its core so that you can access bigger audiences, because at least you get them interested. You bring them in, and then they will dive into the whole thing that is way more complex than what we, you know, in a way presented. But at least then you have a bit of a critical mass of people that, you know, would then act. Yeah. That's the answer.
Yes, it's great. I like to hear you guys almost like restate the basic principles of graphic design and communicative product design once again, in a kind of an era when these things have been questioned a lot, and we get far away from that sometimes into the world of sort of digital scraping and Excel spreadsheets and stuff. So it's nice to hear that reasserted. But personally, I think it needs, like you were saying, to learn from the innovations that are going on and to iterate through these problems and to collect all of this yeah, these small dents together somehow. And I think that's the real, the sort of the hard labor of this enterprise in a way. But I'm going to hand back over to Lauren now, because I know I don't have a good sense of the timing of all this, but I got a good response, so thank you.
Thanks, Alice. I think we are already way over time. Isabel, are you? I've been a naughty
well, we've said until 6, so
yes.
I kind of wanted to try to keep it to that.
Yeah.
Of course, if people still want to ask, there are some, I see there's a lot of things going on in the chat. There was a question for Anthony, actually, as a designer. Do you think that working with brands and companies who contribute to fast fashion, plastic pollution, climate change is right, or should we focus all our efforts into designing for change? So.
Yeah, I think it kind of it goes back to those ideas of like small dents and small nudges. You know, I know personally, you know, I won't work for brands that, you know, kind of are polluters or produce fast fashion or, you know, any of that stuff. And I think it's almost, you know, it's up to us as designers and creatives to not work with those brands, you know, and to kind of to make choices that are seen by people, and, you know, kind of demonstrate that you can, you know, you can work with smaller independent brands, or, you know, kind of people who've got some kind of conscious about material usage and things. So yeah, I think it's only by education that people are able to make those decisions, and to understand that, you know, if you're kind of contributing to everything, you're kind of part of the problem. You know, it's an old cliche, but it's true that, you know, if you're involved in any of this stuff, then you're part of the problem. You know, I think just by living on the planet, you know, we have certain kind of, you know, we should live with a conscious mind, definitely.
If I can add to this, I don't want to tell you how many companies come to us to do projects, you know, the Coca-Cola, the Unilever, the real people behind this massive problem. And they all want to do their marketing greenwashing campaign, you know, and it's very hard to say no when you are a small organization with no fundings. However, you have to stay true to yourself and to your beliefs.
Yeah, I think as soon as you accept, you know, that corporate money, then, you know, your position as a kind of figurehead, or, you know, somebody can talk about this stuff, is compromised.
To a certain extent, I mean, I totally agree. We shouldn't contribute or be kind of part of any sort of greenwashing. But if you could engage with a large corporation and do actual change within a large corporation, the effects that could have to getting one of the large corporations actually being radically circular and so on could be quite large. The question is how much could you actually influence these large corporations? And I guess that's a bit of a philosophical question. We have to do a wrap up. I am very happy with how this all has panned out. It's been very, very interesting. Everything that's been shared in the chat, I will save into a text document that will be shared on the webpage of the project. So, and the whole recording is also on the webpage of the project. So feel free to, the full 4 hours will be online in Elisaba's YouTube channel from tomorrow morning. And then we'll edit it into smaller chunks further in the future, the next week or the week after, and so on. But tomorrow morning, the whole thing, the whole shebang will be there. But Niels, if Niels and Lauren want to do a short wrap up from the project side, and then
I've seen a question from Peter. I don't know if Peter's still around. Calling Peter. I thought it was a really nice question statement that he added here on the chat. Are you there, Peter?
Yeah, I have it here.
Okay.
Peter cannot open his microphone, unfortunately.
Oh, shame. Okay.
But he said that earlier presentations today suggested that the science on the impact of health of microplastics is inconclusive, but some reports suggest that ingested microplastics can physically damage organs and leach hazardous chemicals that can compromise immune function and stunt growth and reproduction. Later sessions today suggest we should act urgently. Should the lack of certainty be communicated in our project? Is uncertainty also a political tool for maintaining the status quo? I think it was a little bit addressed with the conversation, the question that Alice brought up, but if anybody would want to comment on this.
I just thought it's something nice to also think about going forward into the workshop days, perhaps like how we can take this ambiguity with us of, you know, microplastics are on the one hand very dangerous and very harmful, but at the other hand, the other side, it's something we need to live with, and it could also work within our ecosystem. So that's why I just thought it's something nice to take with us.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think what we've seen today is that we have more questions than answers, but there's a lot of approaches. Heather wants to say something, and I'm so happy she's still around. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I'm still here. Well, the last question was about human health, and you know, toxicology and human health is not the only reason to look at what to do about plastics, you know, and so there's lots of reasons to reassess the whole thing. And I could say that in 2013, we had a big European meeting, and for 3 days, and the first morning, they said, let's not talk about why we want to do something, you know, because of effects or other issues. It's a resource efficiency problem. It's a human rights problem. It's a political problem. It's a ecological problem. And just because it's a perceived problem as well. And so I don't want to put too much weight on the human health aspects. We know a lot about plastics and human health from the endocrine disruption chemical side. The particles could be contributing, but it's going to take another few years before we get to the bottom of that. But I still think that the conclusion from 2013 is still there. People just don't really want to plasticize the planet and our bodies, even if it's I don't know, makes our skin look good or something. Even if there's not such a bad human health effect, I think people are still not going to embrace the stuff as being something they want to see clogging up waterways, etc.
Yeah, I think it's also a little bit that we don't need to wait until it is an irreversible problem. We already know that it's seeped into everything, and a little bit what Martin's comments as well. It's not, you can't just take it out of the environment, because you also take out a lot of other things that this is working with. And it's a little bit this, what I was commenting in the beginning, it's not the environment and the Anthropocene completely separated. We are one. And if we are using plastics, we will be having plastics in the environment. And to a certain extent, how can we manage this in a way that we're comfortable with, and how can we continue with that? So a lot of questions to move forward. The students that are participating in the project will be working with this intensively in the next months. This week we'll dive into these topics. So thank you so much for participating and asking so many questions. We can leave the microphone open for some moments if we all want to say something else, but that's a great wrap up, I think.
Thank you, Isabel, for being such a fantastic hostess.
Thank you.
I'm amazed that you did that on schedule today. When I saw that lineup, I was like, no way. But you did it. It was great.
We managed to keep time, actually. Big congratulations to everybody. It was, I know, 10 minutes of stuff, but you managed.
Very nice. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right. Have a good evening.
You too.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, congratulations.
Wow, ¿ah?
Súper,
Súper. Me voy a quedar aquí copiando las cosas del chat y ya.
súper bien. Oye, hablamos para lo que queda, ¿vale? A descansar.
Chao.
Chao.
Bye, Ragnar.